across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense, and I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Very, very, very pleased to have you here and have you join us, whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or your smart speaker, whether you're watching on YouTube or your connected device. Really, really appreciate you spending your time with us today. So much to talk about. I'm with you live, of course, all the way until 1 o'clock. Don't forget, you can go to my YouTube page, and if you miss anything from the show, you can just go to that and hit subscribe, and you never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, we're going to discuss Keir Starmer being slightly under fire as he faces MPs over the Peter Mandelson vetting scandal. We're also going to be talking about the opposition parties who are calling on the PM to resign, with the Tories saying he must take responsibility or reveal the whole truth. And nothing but the truth. Do you think the Prime Minister can do that? Meanwhile, as he's battling for his premiership, Rayner and Burnham have been meeting at a secret summit on Friday night, just chatting about the footy probably. And Jewish leaders have said that police aren't protecting them from synagogue attacks after a third attack on a synagogue in just a week's period of grace. Now, look, we're going to be talking about all of this. I want to ask you the very, very simple question, though. It's kind of laughable, really. Do you believe the Prime Minister's claim that he didn't know Peter Mandelson had failed security vetting for his role as UK ambassador to the US? Do you believe him? If you do believe him, for the love of God, get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. If you don't believe him, get in touch as well. But crucially, I want to know why. What is it about all these statements that you don't believe? If that is the case, or what is it about what the Prime Minister said they do believe? Is it the case that actually, yeah, there really was this guy, Sir Ollie Robbins, the Permanent Secretary at the Foreign Office, newly appointed, who apparently decided, yeah, I just won't tell the Prime Minister this rather crucial piece of information. I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. You can text us on 87222. You can get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate, and text cost one standard network rate message. Now, joining me today, I'm delighted to say, is commentator Sam Armstrong after a bit of a break. Great to have you back.
Good morning.
Really good to have you in the studio. What an amusing day to have you here. I've got a lot to get through before we get to your thoughts on this, and we're going to be talking to some top guests, as always, on the show about what's going on. But let's just have a little recap of where we are, because basically we have got the Prime Minister, while we've got war in Iran, oil prices booming, we've got inflation up, unemployment up, people worrying about the cost of living, talk about shortages very soon. My goodness me, we might even end up with blackouts at some point if we run out of energy, can't afford it, if the Strait of Hormuz continues to be closed as it currently is right now. All of that going on. Oh, and we've still got massive issues with violent crime, problems with our schools, long NHS waiting lists. I mean, you name it, there's that much to do with. What is the Prime Minister and his staff, what are they spending their time doing over the last weekend? Were they working hard? No, they were working out what statement he could make to the House of Commons today to get himself off the hook over what he did or he did not know about Peter Mandelson when he appointed him as the ambassador to the US. Now, this isn't about some little diplomatic role, somebody who just goes around and, I don't know, poses for photos in front of the king and shakes hands with people. We are talking about a man with the highest level of security vetting of our diplomatic corps, somebody who would know every single relevant state secret about our defence, our security, our diplomacy, our economics that would be shared with the Americans, the other Five Eyes security nations. He would know anything and everything. And yet, for some bizarre reason, which we've discussed many times before on the show, the Prime Minister thought it was a good idea to appoint a man who was a known and proven liar, who had been sacked twice from ministerial jobs for lying. He was also a man who he knew way back in 2023, when he was still opposition leader, he knew that he had been facing security concerns by security chiefs over his close links with basically dodgy Russians and a Chinese military company, which was basically his links with his biggest client as a lobbyist. This information was flagged to him and his team as way back as 2023. It was flagged, by the way, during the vetting process, which we were told was followed completely correctly at all times. The Prime Minister, as I'll show you in a few moments, has told us repeatedly that he knows that the full process was followed the whole time. But if he had known then what he knew back in September when we saw the Epstein files published, then he would never have appointed Peter Mandelson. That was just in relation to Mandelson's links with Epstein. But the reality is, he did know all of that then. And actually, due process was followed by all the people he has blamed. Sir Ollie Robbins, the boss of the Foreign Office, the security chiefs, pretty much everybody who was in charge of actually deciding whether this guy was safe to be in this role, which he absolutely, no question at all, objectively was not. But it does seem that, well, either no one at Downing Street cared, or that everyone else is lying and no one bothered to tell the Prime Minister. Let's go back a little bit. Let's have a little bit of history. Let's go back to what the Prime Minister told to Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, back in September last year, the day before Peter Mandelson was sacked as ambassador to the US. Let's listen. Oh, goodness me, can we not
Was
play
the
that
Prime
clip?
Minister aware of this intimate relationship when he appointed Lord Mandelson to be our ambassador in Washington?
Mr. Speaker, as she and the House would expect, full due process was followed during this appointment, as it is with all ambassadors. The ambassador has repeatedly expressed his deep regret. He is right to do so. He is now playing an important part in the US-UK relationship.
So that's what he was saying then. Now, after he'd been sacked, and we found out about, well, many other issues regarding Peter Mandelson, some of which, of course, he is undergoing a police investigation for as denied all wrongdoing. This was the exchange back on the 4th of February this year.
Can the Prime Minister tell us, did the official security vetting he received mention Mandelson's ongoing relationship with the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein?
So clear. Prime Minister.
Yes, it did. As a result, various questions were put to him. I regret appointing him. If I knew then what I know now, he would never have been anywhere near government.
Crucial, what he knew then, what he knew now, except he had already known it. It had already been on the front page of the Financial Times and elsewhere. The very next day, he was asked a lot of questions about the vetting of Mandelson by journalists. And this is what the Prime Minister said then.
There was then, I should add, security vetting carried out independently by the security services, which is an intensive exercise that gave him clearance for the role. And you have to go through that before you take up the post. Clearly, both the due diligence and the security vetting need to be looked at again.
So there was a problem with the vetting procedure somehow. No one's quite sure because it flagged up everything, did it not? And then last Friday, after it emerged in The Guardian, on I think the Labour-supporting paper, The Guardian, on Thursday, that actually Peter Mandelson had failed his security vetting, this is what a rather angry Prime Minister had to say.
That I wasn't told that Peter Mandelson had failed security vetting when he's appointed is staggering. That I wasn't told that he'd failed security vetting when I was telling Parliament that due process had been followed is unforgivable. Not only was I not told, no minister was told. And I'm absolutely furious about that.
He's absolutely furious. He's absolutely staggered. Sam Armstrong, I'm pretty furious. And I'm pretty staggered that he thinks we're going to fall for that nonsense.
Here's what Keir Starmer was told and did know. He knew that Peter Mandelson was a man who had repeatedly been forced to resign from government for dodgy deals going back over 2 decades. Yep. He knew that Peter Mandelson was a man that had maintained a friendship with the world's most notorious paedophile, he knew...
Long after he was convicted.
Long after he was convicted. He knew that Peter Mandelson, while in the private sector, having taken off some time of his busy political career, had represented Chinese and Russian companies with close links to the regime. He knew all of this. He knew it, and he thought that that made him appointable as ambassador, one of the most sensitive positions. The UK Security Force vetting process, that are basically our intelligence services, looked at the same thing and they said, not on your Nelly. The Prime Minister had precisely the same information that they did, and yet he thought, I know what I'm going to stake my entire political reputation on, appointing this man, sending him over there to be my Trump whisperer. I'm afraid his explanations cast his judgment into even worse light. Yeah. This is a guy that has never shown any political antennae before, ever, in his career. He always seems to want to just go through the process, boring. The one time he shows some, takes a political judgment, it was a political judgment, and look, I don't want to be totally
unfair. Very clear,
unfair.
It was a political appointee. That's what Solly Robbins wrote in the appointment letter.
He thought, look, Peter Mandelson, he's very suave, he's very smooth, Donald Trump will get on with him. But the one time he's chosen to exercise his judgment, he has exercised utterly, abjectly appalling failures of just basic morality.
My view, lied about it. You know, his view is that, I mean, the claim we're getting from Number 10 is that no one at Number 10 knew. But his own cabinet secretary knew 2 weeks before the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister knew, he claims, last Tuesday. Prime Minister, if you are watching, and frankly, you'd learn a lot more if you did actually watch or listen to this show than whatever it is you do, pretending to be at work and not actually making a decision as a Prime Minister. I think you're a liar. I think you've lied the whole way through, and I think you'll throw anyone under the bus to protect your job. And when you come into office talking about being Mr. Rules, Mr. Process, Mr. Integrity, and actually don't follow the rules, you just basically ignore the process, and you have zero integrity. And by the way, you just throw all your staff under the bus instead of owning up yourself. Then I'm sorry, I think we've got a right to call it out. I mean, how many people have gone over this? Solly Robbins, the Foreign Secretary, the Foreign Office's senior civil servant, for whom, by the way, I do not hold a candle. Arch Ramona, he's one of the traitors under Theresa May before the wonderful Lord Frost tried to rescue that Brexit deal. I've got no problem with his career being over, although, you know, apparently we're going to pay him a big payoff, but he may be taking legal action. We'll see what happens, and we'll see what he has to say, reportedly appearing before a select committee of the Commons tomorrow. And apparently he's, quote, heartbroken, one of his old friends and colleagues has said. So we'll see whether he comes out fighting or not. But you know, I've got no time for him. But, you know, we've got the Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney. He fell on a sword, and then amazingly, his sword was not stolen when his phone was stolen, rather conveniently last year. We've seen we've lost the Cabinet Secretary.
Political Secretary,
the Director of Communications. I mean, an awful lot of people who I imagine had quite a lot of WhatsApp chats about this issue. It is simply not believable that, given that the Prime Minister, when he was the Leader of Opposition, back in 2023, he and his team were approached by the Security Service who said, look, you've got this chap, Lord Mandelson, giving you quite a lot of input. A lot of your people are his protégés. We're rather concerned about him. He spends a lot of time on the private jet, this Deripaska fella, who's rather close to Putin. We know that the Russian intelligence service are following him. They're definitely looking at his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. We know he's still mates with Jeffrey Epstein. Well, he wasn't at that time, but he was long after. Clearly blackmailable at that point. We've also got concerns about his clients, including a Chinese company close to the Chinese military. A lot of this, by the way, in the public domain at the time. No, carried on keeping Mandelson as advisor. We had Mandelson in the studio on the night of that general election result. He was speaking for basically for the party, and then all his protégés appointed to Number 10. He's clearly had his tentacles into Number 10 and into Keir Starmer. I still don't know what it is. I mean, I have no idea what moves Peter Mandelson has that people keep bringing him back when he keeps messing up. He's currently, I say, being investigated for criminal allegations over something completely different. But here's the thing. There was already a huge... when I say elephant in the room, I mean a herd of giant, you know, absolutely huge big animals in the room, basically saying, this guy is a security risk, and yet he got access to the highest level of security and he would have been able to see stuff. We've already got allegations against him passing stuff to his billionaire mate. He has denied any wrongdoing, but we've seen what is there in terms of in black and white in those emails, unless, of course, those emails are completely and utterly made up that we've seen in the Epstein files. There have got to be some serious concerns now about what else could he, if he had so chosen, been able to pass to basically to our enemies. This is Profumo levels of potential scandal. These are allegations, these are suggestions. I'm not claiming that Peter Mandelson did any of this. He will, of course, deny any wrongdoing in relation to the investigation he's currently at, but I think it's certainly an area which needs to be looked at. But we've got the Prime Minister, basically his best defence is, I know nothing. The Manuel Faulty Towers, I know nothing. I mean, was he in Barcelona the whole time? I don't know. It simply doesn't ring true that no one thought to tell the Prime Minister when more than a dozen people in the Cabinet Office have known since February. His own Cabinet Secretary has known for a few weeks. And even when he knows, he goes to PMQs last Wednesday, zipped, not a word. Thursday, we find out about it. If it hadn't been for The Guardian, we wouldn't know about this at all. We would still be in the dark. He'd still be lying to us.
The comparison with his I know nothing routine doesn't strike me as being comedic, actually. It strikes me as being... there's something kind of deeply sinister, Cosa Nostra, mafia-esque about Keir Starmer. Go back to when he was leader of the opposition and there was this big scandal about Currygate, Beergate, where up in the north of England he was filmed through a window, blatantly breaking the rules that he was so harping on about other people. Every single person that attended that meeting with him soon found themselves not working in the Labour Party anymore. They disappeared. Mediums, ranking heads decided to roll. Again, comes into office. People just keep getting bumped off one after another.
He's lost two chiefs of staff in a year and a half.
After another. And yet he carries on pretending that he has never done anything wrong, never crossed any lines. There is a cover-up that follows that man everywhere he goes. And time again, wrong things happen, bad things happen, and he gets away with it. I think there is something deeply sinister, actually, about Keir Starmer.
Very questionable. I'd like to point out also an awful lot of these people, by the way, all massive Romaniacs.
Yes.
No, they really are there. Mandelson, like, what was the Mandelson? What was going on there? He'd been a European Commissioner. Oh, by the way, they're investigating him over allegations, criminal allegations. Well, again, I'm sure he denies any wrongdoing. But, you know, the whiff here is so strong. I just don't know how many people could have flagged this up. I mean, bearing in mind, you know, David Maddox, the political editor of The Independent, last September, he actually put a question to the then Director of Communications, Tim Allen, who long worked with, again, another protege, Peter Mandelson's, back in the 90s. He put a question to him, and he actually showed the receipts. He showed the WhatsApp messages, basically saying, you know, I've got two sources telling me that that Mandelson actually failed his vetting. And he was reassured, no, everything had happened normally. Now, did the Director of Communications, did he think he had? Did he bother to check? I mean, if a senior journalist comes to you and says, I've heard he's failed vetting, would you not ask some questions? Was he lied to by the Cabinet Office or by the you know, Sir Ollie Robbins, the Permanent Secretary at the Foreign Office? Who did he bother asking anyway? We don't know. This is the stuff we want to know. But here's the interesting thing: the Cabinet Office are the ones who had put together all that paperwork. We've barely seen anything. We've seen a handful of pages, haven't we? This is after that. Remember that humble address that we had in Parliament, which was tabled by the Tories, basically saying we want to have. It was backed by a load of Labour MPs as well. We want to have all the documents about why you chose to appoint Mandelson and what you knew when, and they're supposed to provide those to a committee that are, I mean, have the highest security vetting. These are people like, you know, Lord West, it used to be, you know, the chief of the Navy. These people are absolutely, utterly bound, signed the official secret, bound to secrecy and totally trustworthy. And they have been debating in some of the reports this weekend for the last few weeks about whether or not they divulged this vetting failure to this committee. I mean, this is staggering. They have been ordered by our parliamentary representatives to provide all relevant information to this committee. The committee can then decide what it is safe to publish, because it's an understandable thing where we can't know every single thing. There has to be some stuff that's safe secret. But they were actually debating whether they handed it to the committee itself. Laughably, because it wasn't sure that they would have the right security vetting. Peter Mandelson was in the job as our ambassador to Washington before being security vetted, and then, despite all of the concerns, was given full security vetting up to the highest strap level, as it's called.
But what magnitude of arrogance does that betray? That these people that occupy Downing Street, believe that they are above parliamentary scrutiny. Scrutiny, by the way, which is a majority of their own party, but they believe that duty, that obligation, that accountability, that they are in some way gravitating above it, that they and their mates on the international circuit, well, that the rules don't apply to them, that they are not subject to the people, that they are not subject to our representatives in Parliament, but it just doesn't apply to them. And remember, of course, this is a group that came in claiming themselves to be oh so virtuous, oh so moral, oh so ethical, that they complied with the process, not like these big bad Tories. Well, how long did that mask take to slip? Basically no time at all.
Absolutely. Absolutely, no, there's no question at all. I mean, the Prime Minister and his stuff, he's blamed virtually every member of staff he's ever had. He's going to blame that. I mean, the cleaners, by the way, the cleaners probably knew about the security vetting, as did Larry the Cat before the Prime Minister, based on his line of defence. And I just don't think anyone believes a word he says. I want to hear from you. Do you believe the Prime Minister? He says, I knew nothing before Tuesday. I was in Barcelona. I want to hear from you. Do you think that the Prime Minister's been telling the truth and actually he's been done up like a kipper by his staff, by the civil servants? Tell us if you think that. Tell us if you think not. And actually, he is absolutely lying to our faces and has been doing for many, many months. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. I'll get your calls up next. After that, we're going to be talking to a journalist who has really kept abreast of this story, Dan Hodges from the Mail on Sunday. You don't want to miss that. This is Talk.
Join me, Ian Collins, every weekday. Donald Trump has closed the Strait of Hormuz. This is curious, since the whole point of this part of the war, well, at least as I thought it, or saw it, was to reopen it. Can anybody explain that? You are not a worthy citizen. You couldn't even spot a murderer in your own house. Well, you could.
On YouTube.
Hey, very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. Well, not surprisingly, a lot of you are on the phone lines. I wonder what you're going to say. Do you believe the Prime Minister when he tells us he knew nothing before last Tuesday about Peter Mandelson failing his security vetting, or not? I'd love to know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Let's get straight to Tracy, who is in Staffordshire. Hello, Tracy.
Good morning, Julia.
Good morning. What do you reckon then? Is he telling us the truth?
Well, obviously not. However, I've got a nice way out for him.
Oh.
you like this. Now, if we are to believe that a top civil servant can override a security vetting, okay, pass somebody through, and he doesn't have to tell the Prime Minister, and supposedly that is in law, I'd have slightly more respect for Keir Starmer if he said, well, I wasn't told, this is obviously not right, I'm going to change the law to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Rather than throw the civil servant under the bus. Here's the weird thing. Sir Ollie Robbins had actually given him a number 10 there out by basically saying in a previous statement that basically he didn't tell the Prime Minister, but he didn't tell the Prime Minister because he wasn't allowed to. And they're saying, well, you were allowed to. Surely they should have stuck with the Ollie Robbins line, which could have got them and Ollie Robbins out of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, to be honest, I find it shocking that he didn't ask. Because anybody in the common sense would ask. But if a civil servant is allowed to do what supposedly Ollie Robinson did, and Keir Starmer said the process was followed, well, yes, the process was followed. He failed and he didn't bother asking.
But that's the thing. No, but this is the thing. He was a director of public prosecutions. He was a barrister. If he's making a statement in the House of Commons repeatedly that the process was followed, and I mean, again, in press conferences, and we played all those clips again and again, he's told something. A lot of that time, a lot of people knew he was lying, and they didn't speak up. But if someone asked me, was the process followed, I would go, I would ask my team, can we check that the process was followed? And then they would say yes or no. But I would assume that there would be some checking before that point. Now, if they didn't bother doing that checking and he didn't bother asking them and he didn't care, then I'm sorry, you can't. I mean, it's like me saying, yes, there is absolutely enough milk in the fridge at home. I don't need to buy any on the way home. Have you checked?
Yeah.
Well, all processes were followed. No, have you checked? If I'm making a statement I don't know to be true, I am lying, aren't I?
Yeah, you are, and he undoubtedly is. The thing that I find most frightening about all of this is if civil servants can do that and they have that much power, we don't have a democracy, Julia.
That is absolutely a key point, isn't it? That is the big concern. It doesn't really matter who we vote for because the same people are running the show and making all the decisions.
And that's the bit that worries me most. We don't have a functional democracy at all. So.
If what they're all saying is true, and if it's doing an awful lot of work in that sentence, isn't it? Tracy, great call, loads of good points, better analysis, by the way, and a lot of the numpties I've been seeing who are hired out as experts on this topic. As always, my audience know a damn sight more than they do. Richard is in London and wants to have his say. Hello, Richard.
Hi, Julian. Hello. Great programme as ever. I think effectively this is our Watergate because for about 200 or 300 years we've been able to trust the civil service. Wow. Of course, we've had our doubts, but in theory, I studied government and politics at college. The big difference between the British civil service and the American civil service is that our civil service is independent, whereas American politicians are free to appoint their seniors. We, for hundreds of years, we have had this reputation. Now, it's fairly clear Starmer should go either way. It doesn't matter what he knew. If he didn't know enough, all it tells us is that there was a fairly big cover-up among quite a lot of people. And I can't think of a time in my lifetime when something as serious as even with David Kelly, there was at least an argument about whether Campbell and Blair had misled us. It was, we knew we were being misled, but the point is that at least it was more in the open. This has simply been covered up.
Yeah, absolutely. Richard, I think you're right. I mean, I've been likely to presume. I think, Watergate, absolutely. This is a huge scandal. This isn't about who said, he said, who knew what. This is a huge scandal, and it has massive national security implications. I think an awful lot of people haven't grasped just how serious it is. I think the Prime Minister might have actually bothered reading a brief before he appears in the Commons sometime in the next 4, 5 or 6 hours. 10:30 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Keep those calls coming in, 0344 499 1000. We're going to be talking to Dan Hodges, columnist at the Mail on Sunday, who has been at the forefront of this story throughout. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:33 is the time. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. And frankly, a lot of common sense being spoken by you on the phones as well. Keep those calls coming in. 0344 499 1000. A simple question today. Do you believe the Prime Minister when he claims that he didn't know Peter Mandelson had failed security vetting for his role as UK ambassador to the US? Simple as that. And tell us why you do. Tell us why you don't. I'd love to hear from you if you actually do believe him. I really, really would like to hear from you. Now, I'm delighted to say joining us in the studio today is commentator Sam Armstrong still throughout the whole show. And in this segment also columnist at the Mail on Sunday, Dan Hodges. A very good morning to you.
Morning.
You've been following this very, very closely. He's an absolute must follow on social media, I have to say, in terms of keeping abreast of this. Because, I mean, genuinely, you look away from your phone for about 10 minutes and there's another breaking line in this. I try to summarise as much as I can. There's the details of this at the top of the hour. Simple question. Do you believe the Prime Minister?
It is just about conceivable, possibly just about conceivable, that he personally wasn't told Mandelson had failed the vetting. But what is utterly inconceivable, I mean, and that I have to say is a stretch, but what is utterly inconceivable is Keir Starmer's assertion that nobody in Downing Street at all knew about this. I mean, obviously, as you said, I've been writing about this, well, nothing else since Thursday. I've spoken to dozens of people who worked in government, worked in the Foreign Office, still work in government. People have worked in Downing Street under administrations of all persuasions. I haven't found a single person who thinks it's credible that with an appointment of this importance, that Peter Mandelson failed vetting and nobody in Downing Street was told. Especially because there's an aspect of this that I don't think people have quite picked up on. We were told last week by Downing Street that they had been attempting for weeks, if not months, to try and identify what had happened to Mandelson's vetting, and the line is that nobody told them. I just find that completely incomprehensible.
We know that more than a dozen people in the Cabinet Office who are looking at all of these documents have known since February, a number have known since March. The newly appointed Cabinet Secretary, Dame Antonia Romer, who'd come from the Home Office, she had known for 2 weeks before the Prime Minister. Newly appointed Cabinet Secretary, major issue still ongoing for the Prime Minister, and she thinks not to mention it. What do you make of this claim? And this is the bizarre thing. This claim from Ollie Robbins, who's now out of his job, and we may hear from him, we hope, tomorrow when he appears before a Common Select Committee to answer questions, possibly giving his version of events, depending on, I'm guessing, on what the payoff and the deal is for him for going quietly, because that's how these things work. And by the way, we'll be paying for all of that, just so you know, you and me in our taxes. This line that he wasn't allowed, under the rules, he was allowed to overrule the vetting. So we pay people a lot of money and they spend a lot of time vetting someone for the point of whether or not they are security safe or not. And then this bloke is allowed to just override it, bizarrely, and then not tell anyone at all. Is it conceivable, to use your word, that the head of the Foreign Office and the head of the civil service entirely, and that appointed by the Prime Minister, would not tell the Prime Minister, or at the very least his staff, by the way, you know, you've been going on telly and in Prime Minister's questions at the dispatch box saying that all the vetting process was followed and he was vetted. He wasn't. Do you think it's conceivable they didn't tell him?
I think there are two separate things. I think it may be conceivable that Robbins believed he had the power to overrule the people who had done the developed vetting for Peter Mandelson, because they make recommendations. They are recommendations in relation to the risk associated with the applicant. But again, what is not well, we know it's factually incorrect, and Downing Street themselves have said it's factually incorrect.
Bizarrely, because it actually helped them.
And if you think about this, whilst I completely understand Robbins may have been precluded from going into the details of why Mandelson failed the vetting, the issue, the idea that he couldn't tell anyone about the fact that Mandelson had failed vetting I mean, it's just simply, I mean, again, spoken to lots of people, that's factually not true. And logically, if you think about it, it must be factually not true. Because what would have happened in a circumstance where Robbins decided not to overrule and to go along with the recommendation? Think of the scenario. The Prime Minister has decided to appoint Peter Mandelson. Peter Mandelson has gone through the vetting process.
He's already doing the job.
Peter Mandelson has been refused vetting. Say Robbins had agreed with that assessment. Robbins would have to have told someone that Peter Mandelson has failed the vetting and as a result cannot be ambassador to Washington.
And also simply can't see all these documents.
Otherwise, what would have happened? We would have had a situation where Mandelson failed the vetting, but he was carrying on as...
What is the point of having vetting if you're not going to follow the vetting? Otherwise, don't bother. But the crucial thing is, we won't know, we never will know, realistically, the specific details of the vetting. But we certainly know that, I mean, Dominic Cummings, when he was Chief of Staff to Boris Johnson, he said he sat in meetings where Boris Johnson was told, "Now, you can't have him because of the vetting has shown up, seized prostitutes, lied in his taxes, can't have him," whatever it is. Former Foreign Secretary, now of course Shadow Frontbench, James Cleverly, he said he was absolutely told about people. Their vetting means that there are red flags and you shouldn't appoint them. So again, it's inconceivable that the political figures were not being told these things. But what would be the motive of both Ollie Robbins to keep that from the Prime Minister? I mean, people are saying, look, he was already in the job. It would embarrass the Prime Minister. He wanted to keep his boss, the Prime Minister, sweet. He thought he was helping the Prime Minister by not telling him because he knew it would kind of blow things up. He had plausible deniability. Would that be the purpose?
Possibly, but it all comes back to the central point. Ollie Robbins would not have unilaterally decided to overrule.
2 weeks after starting in the job. He would
only have done so if it had been made crystal clear to him that nothing was supposed to stand in the way of this appointment. And I think there's also another issue as well. We're all focusing on, was Keir Starmer aware of the fact that Mandelson failed the vetting? But there's another issue. Was Keir Starmer aware of the issues that led Peter Mandelson?
And we know the answer to that is yes.
And we know the answer to that is yes. Despite his insistence, I didn't know. We've reported, it was reported in other papers on Sunday, that the reason Mandelson failed the vetting was not actually because of his relationship with Epstein, but his business relationships with China and Russia, and also the fact that he was targeted by the security services of both those. Well, certainly Russia. I mean, we've reported again that happened today. I mean, again, we've reported today in the Daily Mail. Mandelson was had very close links to a company called Sistema, which was a Russian company. It was a defence contractor. It was put to me that this company was basically riddled with Russian spies.
Shocker.
He was exactly. He was on the board of that for years. He joined prior to the Russian invasion, annexation of Crimea. Was told you should leave the company. Refused. All of his links to Sistema was contained within the Cabinet Office briefing document that Starmer was presented with at the start of this process.
And we know that because that's already been revealed by Number 10 to the Commons.
Exactly, and Starmer admitted that to the Commons. This was the Cabinet Office briefing. In fact, it's just about the only document in this entire affair that Keir Starmer has admitted did cross it.
But we also know back in 2023, it's now been revealed that the security chiefs also spoke to his team. Hello,
absolutely.
This guy Mandelson, there's some security concerns about him, not just Epstein, again, China, Russia, etc., already been raised, flagged. So again, they just didn't bother mentioning it to Keir Starmer. Was he busy that day? I don't know, having a beer or a curry. Who knows what he was doing that day? But so the team knew, but he didn't know. And then we've got the issue. His own national security advisor, Jonathan Powell, had said, basically raised question marks. Don't think this guy should.
David Lammy, his own foreign secretary, claims that he warned him as well and said.
I mean,
whether or not that's true.
He chops and changes David Lammy, doesn't he? He probably said that Henry
VII a little bit on this,
or his son, Henry VIII, or his son Henry VII, as he thinks would have been better in the job. But this is it. So many times, again and again and again. This is someone has known, but the key thing is a lot of this stuff was in the public eye. I have read this in newspapers. Even on the Jeffrey Epstein stuff was in the FT. The Independent reported last September they believed there were two sources. I mean, saying that he'd failed his security vetting. Loads of the information for which he likely failed his vetting, and the information about the vetting was known to, frankly, quite a large number of people. And apparently the Prime Minister is Mr. See no evil, hear no evil, you know, and know no evil. His defence is, no one told me, everybody else is in the wrong. Now, he's done this a number of times. He's got through 2 chiefs of staff, one of whom is very conveniently had his telephone stolen. How convenient. He's lost the director of communications. We're told over, basically, there'll be some quite embarrassing WhatsApp. 2 of those people, by the way, both being protégés of Peter Mandelson. Again, you know, the plot thickens at this point. He's you know, fired a cabinet secretary. He's got a new cabinet secretary who apparently has lied to him. He extraordinarily, he has sacked the permanent secretary at the Foreign Office for not telling him that Mandelson had failed his vetting, but is standing by the cabinet secretary who also didn't tell him. This is, I mean, this is utterly bizarre.
But I think there's also a fundamental question, and I think this is actually going to prove to be the most damaging thing for Keir Starmer of all. You've rightly pointed out that his defence is this entire cast of people, none of them told him. But this is the issue. Peter Mandelson was his personal appointment.
Yeah.
He took the very unusual decision to opt for a political appointment, at which point that appointment became his personal responsibility. Why did Keir Starmer himself, you're absolutely right about all the issues that everyone was very well aware of in relation to Peter, why didn't Keir Starmer himself literally sit in front of Peter Mandelson, look him in the eye and say, Peter, I'm appointing you to this incredibly sensitive role in which you will have this access to this incredibly sensitive intelligence information at a very sensitive time in terms of global affairs. I need to be sure you're the right man for the job. Can you tell me, never mind Morgan McSweeney, the vetting people, officials,
man to man, eye to eye.
Will you just look me in the eye and assure me when I make this decision that these issues are not going to become an issue? Now, why didn't he do that?
You'd think he'd be a good person to do that as the former director of public prosecutions.
We're told he's very forensic. But that was his responsibility. As soon as the decision was taken to make a political appointment, it was his responsibility, his personal decision as Prime Minister, and his responsibility to make sure the decision went right. And we're being told. Well, we don't know, because remember when Kemi Badenoch asked him 6 times at Prime Minister's questions, did you actually speak to Mandelson? And he he refused to answer.
Yeah.
Well, he's going to have to answer today.
Yeah, absolutely. Who knows what we're going to find out today? The key thing here is what he said in press briefings, but also what he said in the House of Commons, particularly at PMQs, but specifically at PMQs, whether or not he has lied. If he's lied, then that is a resigning matter, end of the road.
Just on this point, we know he's lied.
Yeah,
we know he's lied because he didn't just say, because people get this wrong, he didn't just simply say due process was followed. He said due process was followed as it is with all ambassadors.
Yeah.
Now, this was not a process.
Opposite.
It's the exact opposite of the process that is followed with all ambassadors.
Well, he could have said as it was with all ambassadors, and then we completely ignored it. That would have been more accurate.
Well, exactly.
Here's the thing, 2 key questions. One, why Mandelson? What is the big... Now, no, you actually wrote a piece praising at the time.
No, absolutely.
Mandelson, he's the player. My thing is, as I've said on the show so many times, if he's that sodding clever, why does he keep getting caught and having to resign from jobs?
But the thing about Peter in relation to the initial appointment was he did have political experience. Crucial, people forget this. He was also, he was Northern Ireland Secretary, so he was experienced at dealing with these with very complex and crucially sensitive affairs. I think from Keir Starmer's perspective, he also had a bit of the political acumen that Keir Starmer didn't have. But as admittedly, as I wrote at the time, there were, obviously, we all knew, risks associated with Peter.
And which apparently, according to Peter Kyle, who said in an interview, they were worth it. Just finally, the security aspects of this. Profumo, Watergate, has been like, look, we're talking about a cover-up. Cover-up's always the worst thing. But just the simple act of appointing a man who'd resigned twice before, links with a billionaire paedophile. There are already now criminal investigations ongoing about that relationship on whether or not the Mandelson handed over key information when he he was in Brown's government to Epstein. These are allegations that are ongoing, and he has denied any wrongdoing, it must be stated. But you know, links to the Russians. He's on Deripaska's, you know, dodgy billionaire Deripaska's jet every other week. Links with you know, a Chinese military firm, Russian military firm. I mean, every single one of those alone is a red flag enough to go, don't go near him. The security aspects of this are huge in terms of what could have, what may actually have happened in terms of breaches to our national security.
Again, I wrote this over the weekend. This is actually one of the greatest national security failings of modern time, because of the sensitivity of the information. Peter Mandelson had access to...
The ambassador to the US gets everything.
They get access to everything. So we've had this whole DV thing. It's not just about DV clearance. They also then have to have what's called strat clearance. And then they have to have a further level of access of clearance, which allows them access to very, very highly sensitive
We're talking like
programs.
eyes-only stuff.
We're talking... Because the key thing is, as Washington ambassador, he didn't just get access to our intelligence, he also had access to very sensitive American intelligence. And the point is, we know now, this is a matter of established fact, the security services, whose job it is to make these assessments, they assessed Peter Mandelson as a major national security risk, because he wasn't given what's called DV, a sort of status of DV with mitigation.
Vetting,
He was literally told, you're blocked.
Oh.
You're too much of a risk. You're blocked.
OK. I mean, it's absolutely fascinating. We'll see what happens this afternoon. Cannot wait to hear this statement. I can imagine the guffaws we're going to hear, not just from the MPs in the chamber, on all sides, I have a funny feeling, but also the guffaws of anyone watching. Dan Hodges, thank you so much for joining us, columnist at the Mail on Sunday. Just a quick response to all of that from Sam Armstrong.
Well, it's a country I despair for when, you know, everything is basically broken right now. Bills are through the roof. Petrol is getting up to 160, 170p a litre. People are really struggling. And what is our Prime Minister doing? He's once again dealing with Labour's paedophile problem that just seems to come up again and again and again.
Bit of party politic in there, I like that. Sam Armstrong, he's back with us. We're going to be talking to Jake Wallace-Simons about more of those attacks on synagogues, 3 in a week. Also, what's going on in the Iran conflict, which this has quite a lot to do with all this as well. Big thanks once again to Dan Hodges. Do keep your calls coming in. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Do you believe the Prime Minister? This is Talk.
Join me, Ian Collins, every weekday. Donald Trump has closed the Strait of Hormuz. This is curious, since the whole point of this part of the war, well, at least as I thought it, or saw it, was to reopen it. Can anybody explain that? You are not a worthy citizen. You couldn't even spot a murderer in your own house. Well, you could. You just didn't tell anyone about it. Everything you need to know. All the breaking news right here on Talk. Only at the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. 10:53 is the time now. Right, let's talk about some other topics now with Jake Wallace-Simons. He's author of Never Again, How the West Betrayed the Jews and Itself. A very good morning to you, Jake.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. Let's talk first of all about this latest synagogue attack. It's the third in a week. We've had a far more sinister attack on a synagogue, the Eden Park in Manchester, where we actually saw 2 people lose their lives. Now we're told the security services are looking into whether or not Iran is behind these attacks. What's going on?
Well, Iran is known to use a technique of terrorism by proxy around the world and also in Britain as well. It's known to employ often Eastern European thugs, mercenaries, basically terrorist mercenaries, not very skilled, not very trained, but willing to do whatever is necessary for the sake of the cash. They're the people who we think were behind the stabbing of Puriya Zarati, the Iranian dissident journalist in Wimbledon in 2024. That was done by the Iranians through this agency of, we think, Eastern European thugs. And Puriya, incidentally, found refuge in Israel. He wasn't safe enough in Britain from Iran, so he had to flee to Israel, ironically enough. And there's speculation that they could be using that same technique again of this is being done with the Iranian signature on it, but using people as intermediaries.
Right, and it is absolutely fascinating. BBC are doing a panorama show tonight, apparently, all about the state of the rising anti-Semitic attacks in this country, and how many British Jews are thinking about leaving the country, many for Israel, and people talking about being called baby killer and goodness knows what in the street, just walking along the street. They vaguely look Jewish, not even wearing a Star of David. Well, that would make it acceptable, but it is extraordinary. I have to say, you and I have talked many times about BBC coverage. It feels to me a bit sodding rich of the BBC, whose reporting of not just Gaza, but also even now Lebanon, has been so ridiculously one-sided, painting Israel as the perpetrators and accusing them of mass civilian murder, effectively, for them to now say, oh, look, and now there's some blowback on Jews in this country. What a surprise.
Yeah, I mean, whether it's the BBC or Keir Starmer or anybody else, it feels like they're fanning the flames with one hand and then reaching for a fire extinguisher with the other, which they're only applying in a very half-hearted way at that. Statements like, this is completely appalling, which the Prime Minister said, I mean, that goes without saying. We don't need that from you, thank you. Statements from Hamish Falkner, the Middle East Minister, he said it was completely unacceptable. It's not just unacceptable, but completely unacceptable. Statements from people like Sadiq Khan, they're trying to divide us and target our city because they can't stand an open pluralistic society that embraces and celebrates our differences. No, they want to kill Jews. They don't care about pluralism. They want to kill Jews.
It's much more specific than that. And also he keeps saying it won't be tolerated. He messages after each attack, it won't be tolerated on our streets. But it is tolerated. It happens every 2 weeks. I'm sure there are plenty of people who are on those marches claiming to care about Palestinians and that cause who aren't anti-Semitic, but there are an awful lot of people on those marches who absolutely are, and we know that by the things they chant. We know when you shout globalise the intifada, when you talk about from the river to the sea, when you have signs depicting babies covered in blood and you have swastikas over the Star of David. Yeah, I think we know you're anti-Semitic, but apparently that is acceptable because these people are often not arrested.
It's been totally indulged. I mean, all the signals coming from the state is that it's okay, it's freedom of expression to say that you want to kill Jews. And we saw, I thought it was so ironic last week when we saw those protests in Epsom against the gang rape of that poor woman. Yeah. There was speculation it was a migrant attack. And immediately you saw the riot police out. Now, I didn't know we still had riot police because ever since October the 7th, when those hate rallies, hate marches have started, we haven't seen a single riot police officer deployed against these thugs.
Well, maybe they've all been sitting in Epsom waiting for the people of Surrey to get upset.
The merest sniff of something far right, and out they all come with their truncheons, their helmets, and their shields. Yeah. The first of these hate marches happened on October the 8th. That was just totally grotesque. Before the blood was even dry in southern Israel, there was not even a pretense that this was about Israel's response, because Israel's response hadn't occurred yet. Yeah. This was clearly support for Hamas, hatred of the Jews, and from then, the only person to have stood up and said that it was a hate march was Suella Braverman, and the consequences of that was that she was sacked rather than the hate marches were stopped. Yeah. And it's been escalating and escalating with more and more permissiveness, and we get to where we are today with blood on the streets in Manchester last year, arson attacks, as you say, 3 in a week. There's been 4 or 5 so far.
Yeah.
And one other symbol that really stuck in my mind of this is that the Kenton Synagogue, which was attacked last night or the other night, the local council has twinned with Nablus. Now, Nablus is a city on the West Bank. It's an ancient biblical city. In Hebrew, it's called Shechem. It's now called Nablus under the Palestinians. It is the hotbed of terror. If you go to Nablus and look on the walls, you will see picture after picture of terrorist martyrs, so-called, all over the place. This is a nerve centre of terrorism on the West Bank. It's been twinned with Brent, and that is where the arson attack happened in Britain. This is a foreign problem which has been imported here over decades, and the government is just, like I say, fanning the flames with one hand and reaching for a fire extinguisher inefficiently with the other.
Yeah, I have to say, my message to British Jews who are thinking about leaving this country, please do not. It's a source of national shame to me that anyone should consider leaving this country because they are unsafe.
Well, I mean, on that note, sorry to interrupt, but on that note, my mum has got lots of, she's Orthodox Jewish, visibly Jewish, as people say these days, so sort of unpleasantly. Yeah. She has lost so many friends to emigration to Israel, British Jews who've lived here for generations, that she now wants to go to, events and pottery classes and things, and she hasn't got anyone to go with because everyone has fled.
It's absolutely appalling. I mean, again, the idea, if I can't bear one more politician saying it's unacceptable, they're not doing it. If it's unacceptable, do something about it. Jake Wallace-Simons, so much more I want to talk to you about. There's so much going on today. I'm sure you'll understand. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I'll get Sam Armstrong's thoughts on that in just a couple of moments. Lots more coming up. I want to get to more of your calls. 0344 499 1000. Do you believe the Prime Minister when he says, I know nothing. I didn't know until last Tuesday that basically the man I appointed to be our most senior ambassador in the world hadn't passed security vetting, and just no one bothered to mention it to me. Is that remotely plausible to you?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. It's almost 3 minutes past 11. This is Talk with the Home of Common Sense, and I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Whether you're listening on DB Plus Radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, or your connected device, thank you so much for your company. Coming in this hour, more about whether or not you do or you don't believe the Prime Minister's claim that he didn't know anything about Peter Mandelson's vetting having been failed when he appointed him as UK ambassador to the US. Of course, he appointed him and had him in the job even before he'd been vetted, even though, of course, he had plenty of information well before that point about why he was a totally unsuitable candidate. But he's going to be giving a statement to the House of Commons later today. Will he convince everybody? Doesn't sound like he's going to convince anyone so far. I want to hear your thoughts on that. We're also going to be talking about the US attacking and seizing an Iranian cargo ship attempting to get past its blockade of Iran's ports, due to start talks in Islamabad tomorrow. These latest resolutions, attempted talks to resolve this Iran conflict. We're heading to the end of that ceasefire 2-week period. Will those work or not? And Nigel Farage has vowed that a reform government would deport up to 400,000 more asylum seekers by reviewing claims. That's more than the 600,000 he's already promised to deport who are illegal migrants. Oh, that's a lot to support, isn't it? We'll talk about that in the show as well. Delighted to say, joining me for the whole show today, welcome back with open arms. He's been a bit busy. Commentator Sam Armstrong joins us. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
It's so lovely to have you back. We've had a valiant replacement in terms of Benedict Smith. I hope we can keep both of you.
Yes.
I know my audience are very, very happy to hear from both of you all the time. We're going to do another quick run through, just to keep everyone up to date, because I do think when it comes to this Mandelson vetting story, it's very easy to get lost wood for trees, isn't it? It's really easy to go, oh, who cares about who knew what when? This isn't just about a Prime Minister lying to us. This isn't just about a bunch of civil servants who may or may not have lied to the Prime Minister by omission, by not telling him stuff he really should have known. This isn't just about the Prime Minister's poor judgment. It's not just about processology and within government and the law. And it's not about, deceiving the Commons. It's not about any of that. This is about a massive national security risk. This is about the Prime Minister going over the heads of everybody else to appoint a man who had been sacked twice for lying from previous jobs, who is currently, not known at the time, but currently under police investigation for what he is alleged to have done. He's denied any wrongdoing during one of those jobs in terms of handing secrets over to a billionaire paedophile friend, best pal of his. It's not just about the fact that, he knew that Peter Mandelson had maintained his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, even staying in his home after he had been convicted of basically soliciting a child for prostitution in the States. In fact, staying in his home while he was in prison for that very crime. It's not just that the Prime Minister would have known, because he was told in 2023 by security services there were some issues with Peter Mandelson being so closely involved in the leader of the opposition's office, all his protégés working for him, because of his close links to Russians and Chinese organisations, the fact that he was being clearly monitored by the Russian intelligence services, and some big question marks there. All of that was enough to be a big red flag. But the fact that he actually did fail vetting, and no one told the public, no one apparently told the Prime Minister, or even indeed Peter Mandelson. It was considered to be totally irrelevant, unnecessary. He was already in the job. And this two-bit nobody, Sir Ollie Robbins, OK, a senior civil servant, decided that he just wouldn't tell anyone and he would just overrule the vetting back when Mandelson was already in the job. He's now been sacked for that. And yet we're told that pretty much everyone in the Cabinet Office, including, by the way, the Cabinet Secretary recently appointed by the Prime Minister, knew either in February or March, or at least 2 weeks ago, in the case of the Cabinet Secretary. None of them are being sacked for not telling the Prime Minister. That said, he has lost a Chief of Staff over this and a Director of Communications. So what on earth is going on? Well, let's just give you a few clips just to take you back to what the Prime Minister has said before, ahead of his statement in the House of Commons today. Due to speak around the 2:30 mark, it may well be 3:30, maybe a bit later, but he's going to basically tell the full story, we're told, and explain why he did nothing wrong. But are we going to believe him? Because let's go all the way back to September last year. This is the 10th of September at PMQs, when Kemi Badenoch was asking Keir Starmer about the appointment of Mandelson. This is after we'd already had the Jeffrey Epstein files published, but the day before, the Mandelson was actually fired by the Prime Minister. And we were told afterwards, if we'd known then what he knew now, he would never have appointed him. But this is what the Prime Minister said the day before he fired Mandelson.
Was the Prime Minister aware of this intimate relationship when he appointed Lord Mandelson to be our ambassador in Washington?
Mr. Speaker, as she and the House would expect, full due process was followed during this appointment, as it is with all ambassadors. The ambassador has repeatedly expressed his deep regret. He is right to do so. He's now playing an important part in the US-UK relationship.
Well, that claim about due process was, frankly, completely and utterly untrue. Had the Prime Minister been told that due process had been followed but had been lied to, or did he simply not bother asking? Well, let's go further forward to February this year, the 4th of February, when we had yet again a PMQ's exchange between the Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch, and the Prime Minister. This is what was said then.
Can the Prime Minister tell us, did the official security vetting he received mention Mandelson's ongoing relationship with the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein?
So clear. Prime Minister.
Yes, it did. As a result, various questions were put to him. I regret appointing him. If I knew then what I know now, he would never have been anywhere near government.
This, of course, was just in relation to Jeffrey Epstein. That's the only thing we knew, specifically at the time, about the reason why he'd been sacked. Go to the next day when Keir Starmer's at a press conference asked by journalists about the security vetting. This is what he said then. We can't get the clip. Well, what he did say then was, there was then, I should add, security vetting carried out independently by the security services, which is an intensive exercise that gave him clearance for the role, and you have to go through that before you take up the post. Clearly, both the due diligence and the security vetting need to be looked at again. And of course, that wasn't true.
I wasn't told.
He hadn't gone through the same vetting that all ambassadors go through. That was a statement that simply wasn't true. Let's go to a final clip, which hopefully will work. And this is from last Friday, a pooled interview with the Prime Minister after it was found out, well, The Guardian produced this information on the Thursday to say that actually Mandelson had failed his vetting. What did the Prime Minister say then?
That I wasn't told that Peter Mandelson had failed security vetting when he's appointed is staggering. That I wasn't told that he'd failed security vetting when I was telling Parliament that due process had been followed is unforgivable. Not only was I not told, no minister was told. And I'm absolutely furious about that.
He's absolutely furious, Sam Armstrong. Are you absolutely furious?
Well, look, I am angry about this, but frankly, I'm not particularly surprised. I thought the Prime Minister was basically out of his depth / a little bit dishonest before. I thought that he had made a terrible decision in appointing Peter Mandelson. Frankly, nothing I've learnt in the last week has told me anything I didn't know about this man that I didn't know before. But what really gets my goat is that this man has now been our Prime Minister for near on 2 years. And
it feels like longer.
It does feel like longer. And the world is an unprecedentedly dangerous place, a place of great flux, a place of great importance. And right across the country, people look around and they just see everything that they have to interact with is broken. They can see that living standards in this country are getting palpably, physically feel them getting worse all around them. And yet our Prime Minister comes on speaking like he's holding his nose because he can't quite breathe properly when he's having to read out the lines that have been written for him by others, and just seems utterly
out of his depth,
unwilling, incapable of gripping those problems and dealing with them. Let me just give you one example, which is petrol prices and diesel prices. Diesel is pretty much at £2 a litre. Yep. That makes anybody that has to drive a van for work, drive a lorry for work, it is making it phenomenally difficult to make.
Just go to... most of us have got diesel cars still. I've still got a diesel.
To make ends meet. Right across Europe, where their governments are actually looking at what they can do, they're focusing on the day job. They've done things like cut fuel duty, cut VAT, to make it just a little bit easier, because 50% of what you spend on petrol is just tax that goes straight to Rachel Reeves. Our Chancellor, our Prime Minister, what are they doing and obsessing with? Talking about, did I know this particular detail detail about this element of the process when I appointed the world's most notorious paedophile's best mate to be our ambassador.
But here's the thing. So
United
a lot of
States.
people will say, well, why are journalists going on about this? Is the Westminster bubble story. I mean, here's why this does matter. Because A, the security implications of this are huge. A man who was already known to be dishonest being appointed to this role, who failed security vetting, we have no idea in terms of what the level of what he would have been seeing in terms of our security, our defence, our economic, economic importance, you name it. The information that he would have had, we have no idea whether that information has been secured or not. We simply do not know. And we have reason, given his past, not the current criminal investigation, he has denied any wrongdoing there, but in terms of his own past, about whether or not that is secure. That is profumo level of security risk for this country. But secondly, I think, as you say, our Prime Minister spending his time on this stuff and his staff spending his time on this stuff, I don't think they've thought about a single thing other than when he laughably went to Paris to co-host with his little mini emperor Macron a virtual summit about the Straits of Hormuz and reopening it. By the way, the only people not involved in that, America, Israel and Iran. I mean, seriously, what was the point of that? A virtual summit, and he went to Paris for it. Does he understand his laptop works in number 10? I mean, apparently not, with his vetting to be done. So they're spending their time on this stuff rather than, as you say, running the country. But that's a crucial thing for me is, if they're that incompetent at just simply appointing someone to be our ambassador, right? If they get that much stuff wrong, if there is that much of a problem with the civil service, if that is the case, not telling the political appointees, the democratically elected Prime Minister and his ministers, key information that has security implications, either A, we have a civil service that is running the country, don't bother voting anymore, folks, because they're in charge and they decide everything, or a combination of that, and we have a Prime Minister who is, and an entire government that is utterly incapable of doing the job. If they get it that wrong on this, are you surprised that the budget is so useless? Are you surprised that trade policy is so bad? Are you surprised that they can't run the NHS? They can't run schools? They can't run our defence services? So we've got, a frigate or a destroyer that could be available if we do need one when our air bases are attacked by the Iranians. No wonder everything else is so rubbish if they can't even manage the appointment of one bloke to one job without buggering it up. That's quite a giveaway of the level of incompetence, ineptitude and frankly dishonesty that we see in this government.
Yeah, and by the way, there are millions of people in this country that are working in one sort of job or another that from time to time have to run hiring processes, and they are expected to jump through a series of hoops, and you've got to go through the process and you've got to take references and do things like that. And I know in any organisation that I'd worked in, if somebody had hired somebody and they said, no, what you really want to do is hire Joe Smith, and then it turned out that Joe Smith was a wrong un, right? Yeah. And then your boss comes round to you and says, did we check his references before we let him at the till? No, I just thought not. Or actually, one of the references said, yeah, he'd been done for nicking out the till before, but I liked him, so I thought I'd appoint him anyway. That person would have been out of a job in the private sector. And it just seems to me that Westminster is going to have this obsession and discussion about this story this week, and in some ways I get it and understand it. But I feel this week, when the sun is shining, which means that migrants are going to come streaming across the English Channel, never mind the Straits of Hormuz, I'd take it if the government could control the English blooming Channel, that they are so far away from the ordinary reality of people that are paying more and more in taxes to take less and less home at the end of each week, that I just feel sick that a political system to which I've spent quite a lot of time working, trying, and I think most people do go into it with decent enough intentions, has just ended up in this sorry, sordid mess that just failed totally and utterly to deliver for the British public.
But also, my things again, I really hate it when politicians treat us like we're idiots. I don't like being insulted. I don't like being called a far-right bigot because I express concern about, illegal immigration and the like. And I definitely don't like being treated like I'm, frankly, a fool. like an absolute ignorant fool, along with apparently the rest of the public, when we're told, I mean, the nonsense that the Prime Minister is spouting and how angry he is and how staggering it is. Yeah, he's right. I mean, Kemi Babe not used the right word, preposterous. The whole thing is preposterous. It really, really is. But again, this isn't just a Westminster bubble story. This tells you why our country is in the mess it's in, because of the absolute poor quality of the civil service and dishonesty. And I'm sorry, seriously, I mean, we are talking about some really, really ropey people who keep just getting pushed up the echelons. And it doesn't matter if they lie or if they're incompetent, they just keep getting promoted to another department. And the poor quality of a lot of our politicians, frankly. I mean, it is absolutely despairing. I want to hear from you, though. Really simple question. Do you believe the Prime Minister's claim he didn't know Peter Mandelson had failed security vetting for his role as UK ambassador to the US? Tell us why you think he did. He was telling us the truth. Tell us why you think he wasn't telling the truth. I want to hear your calls. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Text us on 87222. Get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1. Standard network rate message. Now, you touched, Sam Armstrong, on the issue of, legal migration and those boat people who are going to be turning up. I'm like you. Every time I look out the window, I go, oh, it's quite nice today. Oh, yeah, there'll be another 300 arriving today. Right now, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage and their spokesman on Home Affairs, Zia Youssef, are holding a press conference in London on migration policy. Some of this has already been announced last night. Reform had already promised they would, over a period of a 5-year parliament, if they get elected, deport 600,000 people who are illegally in this country. Those are people who are, overstayed their visas, or illegal migrants who've arrived on boats or on the back of lorries. They've also now said they will review all grants of asylum going back 5 years. So presumably, 5 years from now. So we're looking back at the Boris wave of those of people coming legally, but then obviously it's the asylum applications. But we do know we have an issue with a load of people who arrive, all exposed last week, Pakistanis and Bangladeshis in particular, arriving on visas perfectly legally. Those visas come to the last few months. They suddenly miraculously discover that they can't possibly go home, and so they claim to be gay or Christian or atheist or whatever it is. But he's also talked about deporting up to 400,000 asylum seekers if the party wins the next election. They'd have to create effectively pop-up detention centres, which would have to hold thousands. Currently, we can only hold a few hundred, just a few thousand in deportation centres. I have to say, loving this, Sam Armstrong. Sounds good to me. I find it extraordinary that anyone doesn't think we should deport people who are here in our country illegally. I think that's a weird extremist view to hold, and deporting people who've no right to be here is the centrist, moderate opinion. Nice to hear a politician say they'd actually go on and do it, but will they get it done?
Well, if you're talking about a national security emergency, 1 million people, mainly fighting-age men, entering in this country illegally, one way or another. What, 600,000 plus 400,000 is
a lot of those will be the 600,000. Those would be people who've overstayed visas.
Sure, but they're here illegally. They have stolen the place from another person that could have been more deserving. Or
they haven't stolen the place from another person. No, we didn't want those people here.
They are stealing off the generosity of the British public. These people have been here for far too long. The fact that the number has reached those astronomical levels in recent memory is extraordinary to me. We should be talking about nothing but the fact that 1 million people are in this country that ought not to be. And
I think it's way more than that.
What?
Remember when we had the EU situation Brexit, and people had to register they'd been in the country for a while, and basically they didn't know about 2 or 3 million of them who were in the country. And those are people who'd arrived legally and had no reason not to be on the books of when they were working. I would be really surprised if there aren't 2 million illegal people in this country.
This country requires, and this policy that is set to help, it would be the greatest movement of people from one country outwards in probably for this country in historic memory, and that is what this would be. That is what it requires, because at the end of the day, the reason that services are so stretched, the reason that our economy is so far falling behind, the reason that there is so much crime in our streets is that there has been this extraordinary permissiveness in our society in which a lot of people who do not share our values have entered our streets, have metastasized across the entire country, and I'm sorry, but everybody that walks on any high street, any town centre in the country, can see it with their own eyes. They've had politicians telling them it didn't happen. Then they were told, oh, there's nothing that can be done about it. Yes, there is. We can leave these stupid human rights laws. We can get these people gone, and we can go back to living the kind of life that many people believe that was theirs
when I see antisocial behaviour or crimes on my streets, invariably it is somebody, and I live in central London, it is somebody who speaks with a foreign accent. It's as simple as that. I mean, that's a good way of telling if somebody is British or not. I don't go by colour, I go by accent. It's a really good clue to where someone is from and whether they're speaking English or not. It is simply untenable to have this number of people in the country. I'm surprised, though, because I believe we were told all these people worked in the NHS.
Doctors and engineers.
Doctors and engineers, the lot of them. I mean, good luck if it can work. I'll tell you something else we've imported, and that's anti-Semitism. It's absolutely prevalent on the left. Hello, Green Party, and your delightful anti-Semitism. The number of Green Party candidates who have celebrated October the 7th, who openly, like publicly on their social media feeds, and are supporting just the most extraordinary characters and organisations which are blatantly, openly, they're not anti-Israel, they're anti-Semitic, is quite extraordinary. But we've also imported a huge number of people. Again, let's call it what it is, the third world, the backward medieval world where, it is totally the norm that you would hate Jews. In many parts, it's North Africa, in Pakistan, Bangladesh, in the Middle East. These are completely openly held views. And we've imported it. You can see this in the stats in terms of the increase in the attacks on Jews. It's so much higher. It's 8 times higher than attacks of anti-Muslim attacks, even though we've got a tiny, much smaller population of Jews in this country. Third attack in a week on a synagogue in Kenton. Now we've got the counter-terror police investigating whether or not Iran is paying basically British thugs for hire to carry out arson attacks on London synagogues. Very likely, we know this is the sort of thing that the Iranians do. But again, what took you so long, security services?
Well, firstly, what took them so long? But secondly, what is continuing to take our own government so long? We know that this happens, and every country across the world is dealing with this, right? It's not just happening in the UK, but in Europe and in the United States, what have they done? And in fact, in the entire rest of the Arab world that has been dealing with this problem for a long time, they have prescribed groups like the Muslim Brotherhood. They've prescribed the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. And yet our government, time and time again, has been offered the opportunity to do that. And to this day, when Iranian agents are paying people to commit terrorist atrocity after terrorist atrocity, and as far as I'm concerned, trying to burn down places of worship is a terrorist atrocity. When they are being shown to do that again and again and again, the government cannot bring itself to ban these groups, to criminalise membership of them, and to go after the people that are going after British Jews in this country.
It is extraordinary, isn't it? Can I also ask you about something? I know it's very close to your heart. You do a lot of work with the Free Speech Union, don't you? But universities that muzzle free speech could face fines of £500,000 or up to 2% of their income amid fears speakers have been cancelled. Fact that speakers are being cancelled, particularly over the issue of opposing gender ideology. So basically, if you know biological fact and you refuse to lie or pretend you believe something you know not to be true, we know that people are getting cancelled. We know this keeps on happening. This is, I have to say, a great surprise that this is something that is happening, but I hope it also applies to anti-Semitism and the shutting down of any free speech by people on campuses.
Well, I'm afraid it's a little surprising when you go back to the origins of this. This law was actually passed under the Conservative government more than 2 years ago. It was due to come into effect in 2 Septembers ago, and in Bridget Phillipson's first act as Education Secretary, she cancelled the whole thing. She got taken to court by the Free Speech Union. Eventually, she said, oh, no, I'll bring in parts of it. So, yes, universities are going to be under this old law, are going to be subject to this. But Bridget Phillipson is changing the law to ban students from being able to bring cases. So the Office for Students will not be able to investigate a complaint that free speech is being suppressed if that complaint is made by a student.
So it has to be by an academic?
It has to be by an academic or a visiting speaker.
So they get freedom of speech, but students students don't?
Because the priority of this government, was to continue to allow students to be shut down for holding unpopular opinions. That is the government that we're dealing with.
Fact-based opinions. That's what they are. I'm sorry, let's call them what they are. Just finally, can we let's just talk about Sadiq Khan, the London mayor. I mean, you've got to see the funny side of this, sort of. Sadiq Khan posted a tweet on Sunday about saying Happy St George's Day. And it's probably, of course, I mean, his usual nonsense about diversity. Head of St George's, he wrote, he wrote firstly, I always said London's diversity is our greatest strength. Today on St George's Day, I'm joined by interfaith leaders from across London. We come together to celebrate all that unites us and affirm St George's Day flag as a symbol that belongs to us all. And there's a bunch of people in Trafalgar Square, of course, very diverse, of course, diverse of appearance. I don't know whether they're diverse of opinion or not, that doesn't matter, waving their little England flags. As a lot of people pointed out to him, that was the 19th of April and not the 23rd of April, which is St George's Day. He deleted that and then wrote, ahead of St George's Day, I was joined by interfaith leaders from across London. We came together to celebrate all that unites us and affirm the flag of St George as a symbol that belongs to us all. So he feels so strongly about St George's Day, he doesn't even know when it is. But what's the diversity thing about? The whole point of St George is it's just about England. Why does he have to bring that up every sodding time?
Well, let me tell you what our country is to Sadiq Khan. It is a political tool, a little hammer over which he can beat us over the heads for holding the wrong opinion. That's what our country means to him. It is something that he can use for a stupid tweet to ram down our throats his particular progressive, woke nonsense. That is all our country is to him.
I like to point out that basically no one's allowed to reply to his tweets unless he follows you. Luckily, he follows me, so I get to reply to him. Aren't I lucky? Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on everything we're talking about. So much more to come. We're going to be talking about Iran and what the hell is going on with these peace talks and indeed the Strait of Hormuz. But I want to hear from you very specifically. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Do you believe the Prime Minister's claim that he didn't know Peter Mandelson had failed security vetting for his role as UK ambassador? Just to let you know, Nigel Farage, Reform UK leader, has just said he would support a vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister. Unlikely that will happen, though, to be fair. He says, I find it totally incredible the Prime Minister didn't know. I do believe strongly that he misled the House of Commons. He lied to the public and he's caught in a terrible trap. Up next, your calls. This is Talk.
Join me, Ian Collins, every weekday. Donald Trump has closed the Strait of Hormuz. This is curious, since the whole point of this part of the war, well, at least as I thought it, or saw it, was to reopen it. Can anybody explain that? You are not a worthy citizen. You couldn't even spot a murderer in your own house. Well, you could. You just didn't tell anyone about it. Everything you need to know. All the breaking news right here on Talk. Only at the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Let's get straight to your calls. Louise is on the line in Kent. Louise, do you believe the Prime Minister when he says he didn't know anything about Peter Mandelson's security vetting being failed?
No, but can I just say, the 19th of April was Primrose Day.
Oh, lovely. They could have all been waving primroses.
Exactly, because it's my cousin's birthday.
Oh, there you are then. Happy birthday to your cousin.
So, yeah, a couple of things, actually. Also, Farage, he doesn't need to open pop-up centres. He's already got them. He just closes all the hotels and not lets anyone out of them. They put security around them. Nobody's allowed out until they've been assessed and kicked out. So everywhere they are now, they just leave them there, but they secure them so they're not allowed to leave.
I don't know how secure my local Holiday Inn is, to be fair.
I don't care. They can do it. They're not stupid. They can do it. Right, so that's that one.
Okay.
Now, as far as it goes for all this stuff with Mandelson, firstly, I've always said Mandelson was far more of a problem than Andrew with all this Epstein stuff, so there's that. But also, I'm a bit confused because they keep saying, oh, we're not allowed to tell anyone about the security vetting, so what's the point of it? But also, Starmer is meant to be the most secure, highest bloke in the land. Yeah. If you can't tell him, what then? But if the security vetting, which I can't make out, did it actually happen after he was appointed?
Yes, it did.
So what was the point of it? Because he'd already been appointed. And if the vetting was then done and people knew, surely you could go to Starmer and say, look, I'm afraid he's failed the very highest security. We can't tell you why, but actually he's failed. But frankly, if you can't tell the Prime Minister, who is meant to be, in kind of what he would know stuff that most others couldn't, what is the point of any of this? And the money wasted in doing a vetting process after the horse has bolted because he's already been appointed.
Yep. What's the point? Exactly, what is the point? I imagine you got access to higher level documents at that point. Very good points, Louise. Honestly, every single one of our calls so far has said more useful things than most of the so-called experts on the telly box this weekend. John is in Wokingham. John, do you believe the Prime Minister? John, are you speaking? John, hello, my love. I can barely hear you. Hello, John. Hello. Let's try and get John on a better line if we can. I don't know what's going on there, but let me just bring you actually some breaking news. The government has just released a whole new load of documents under that, do you remember that humble address process where the Commons basically said, we demand to see the documents about this vetting. Now, this shows that Keir Starmer was advised that a political appointee like Peter Mandelson should undergo national security vetting before he was formally appointed. This is according to documents published by the government under the terms of that humble address. There's a letter from the then Cabinet Secretary, Lord Simon Case, setting out the process. He wrote to the Prime Minister, you should give us the name of the person you would like to appoint and we will develop a plan for them to acquire the necessary security clearances and do due diligence on any potential conflicts of interest or other issues of which you should be aware before confirming your choice. That message was sent to the Prime Minister on the 11th of November 2024. Bearing in mind that the announcement about Peter Mandelson being the choice for the ambassador was made on the 20th of December 2024, and he took up the post a couple of months later, and his security vetting carried out after that point. Now, Keir Starmer said he was not told of any issues raised. He's going to defend himself in the Commons this afternoon, but he'd failed the process. Frankly, Sam Armstrong, this is unbelievable.
Well, look, in a sense, the Prime Minister gets to appoint whoever he wants, and it's his decision at the end of the day, but then he needs to live or die with the decision he made.
Yeah.
And he made the decision that this guy's relationship with Epstein was over. It turns out it wasn't, and frankly the Prime Minister, if he'd had any sense of self-respect, decorum, or any of the usual basic standards of politics, would have gone back then in September.
But he said, basically the top civil servant at the time basically said, these are you'll be made aware. You should be aware before confirming
If you
your
ignore
choice.
the system, you can't then blame it.
Yeah, which he's trying to do. 11:36 is the time. Sorry, we couldn't get John back on the line. I promise I'll get you on later. We'll get to a lot of your texts and tweets as well. We'll go to a quick break. Then we're going to be talking about what on earth is going on with the Strait of Hormuz, the seizing of that Iranian-backed tanker by the United States, and will those talks develop to actually keep the ceasefire going? We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, good morning. Welcome back to the show. 11:39 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and this is Talk. Right now, let's talk about what is going on in the Middle East. You'd think an awful lot of our political class would be focused on that, given that is one of the reasons we are seeing our sky-high prices when it comes to filling up our cars, but also, as we're likely to see, when we try and turn our heating on after the summer, when that price cap changes very, very, very scarily in very much the wrong direction, thanks to those spiking prices in oils. Well, let's talk about all of this with special correspondent at the Daily Mail, David Patrikarakos. A very, very good morning to you, David.
Morning, Julia.
Thanks for joining us. I also want to get your thoughts actually on the leading story today, Peter Mandelson, Russian links. We'll get to that in a moment, but let's talk about what is going on in the Middle East, particularly the Strait of Hormuz. We've had the US intercepting, shooting at and seizing an Iranian-flagged cargo ship. Lots of people are seeing this as kind of escalating this battle over the Strait of Hormuz, and particularly as we're supposed to be seeing talks in Islamabad as early as tomorrow between the US and the Iranians about continuing this ceasefire. How significant is this?
Well, look, I mean, we were told that the strait was open. We were told that things had been resolved. I did say that this was unlikely to hold totally. And now it appears that we're not quite back to square one, but already there's miscommunication. There's threats. The Americans sent a message saying, evacuate your engine room. We're going to blow it up. The Iranians are now saying that any more attacks and they'll blockade the straits again. So confusion continues.
Yeah. I mean, it was 6 hours. I mean, the Americans were in contact with the Iranian cargo ship for 6 hours, basically saying, you ain't getting out. You're going to have to turn back, and they didn't. So I mean, they knew that there was that ability by the Americans to stop them.
Oh, of course. I mean, and the Americans have said this, right? I mean, that is the card that they have to play in all this. So it does seem that whatever has been agreed, nobody's quite sure, and it's not being fully adhered to, as you'd expect. The Iranians are going to try and wriggle to the degree that they can. They're going to try as much chaos as they can in the Strait, which remains their primary point of leverage.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know this is a huge point of leverage, and there's a really big concern about this because, of course, this impacts the entire world. It's not just about petrol and gas. This is, fertilizer, helium, you name it. I mean, absolutely vital for the world supplies, the entire world economy. There's certainly a lot of pressure on the American president at the current time. He's facing in a few months' time those midterm elections in November, and with prices going up in America, and people are very unhappy about this. But in terms of the pressure on the Iranians, is there any sign that they are likely to, back down, particularly over the issue of enriched uranium and their attempts to get a nuclear weapon? Because there's quite a lot of dispute about what happened at the last set of talks in terms of what was basically demanded by the Americans, but led by J.D. Vance, the vice president, from what the Iranians had to agree to for everything to stand down and go back to normal.
Look, when you assess these things, and in my first book on Iran's nuclear program, Julia, I spent years analysing Iranian nuclear negotiations. You just have to ignore what they say, because they will just say, we will never yield, we will do this, and blah, blah, blah. And what do? Look, when the Iranians showed up to those peace talks in Islamabad, if you remember, they sent so many people in their dark suits, they were like a third-rate Reservoir Dogs walking into the negotiations, but they sent them. Okay, which said to me that they were serious about making a deal. Look, the problem about all this is that what we have here, and I'm not sure, I think we might have talked about this before, it's what I call the despot's dividend, okay? There are two sides here, one of which is an autocratic state that has completely cut all comms from inside its own country. The other, Israel, America, and everybody else, are a conglomeration of democracies. The Iranians have cut comms. We can't hear Iranian people furious, angry, desperate. They can hear the whole world criticizing Trump and Netanyahu, and it has emboldened them. Okay, but we don't, and I've said this from the beginning, I'm not saying the war's going to be a success, I'm saying we cannot accurately judge it until we understand the depth of degradation in Iran. People are talking about, the Iranians might get $10 billion sanctions relief. It is my understanding we're talking about $200 billion of damage to infrastructure. And that's infrastructure, Julie, the Iranians care about. It's not civilian houses, which they don't care about. It's IRG facilities, missile sites, all of these things. So until that plays out properly, nobody can say for sure.
And this is it. And there's a lot of people saying in terms of regimes like this falling, regimes don't look like they're going to fall until the moment they fall. Often it does come as something of a surprise. There's a big debate about whether or not the Iranians are even going to send a delegation to Islamabad for the next set of talks. But that 2-week ceasefire deadline is rapidly approaching. We understand that J.D. Vance is supposed to be leading, again, the American delegation and are planning to go no matter what. Is there a view that, the Iranians will turn up, really?
I think they would be very foolish not to, because then they would hand the quote-unquote moral high ground to the Americans. If the Iranians don't show up, what are the Americans supposed to do? So will you have no interest in negotiations? I'd be extremely surprised if the Iranians won't show up. But it's a very Iranian thing to do, to say, we won't show up, we won't show up.
And then turn up. But this is the thing, it's one thing, they just got to go across the border. It's not quite the same for the Americans flying across the Atlantic and the Med and getting there. But this is the thing. You say, you can't ignore what the Romanians say, you look at what they do, but actually, they even when they do say things and they sign deals, and we've had all these deals before, and something that Donald Trump criticised in his first term and actually undid in his first term. They do a deal and basically completely renege on it anyway in terms of the enriched uranium. Given that Donald Trump said in his very first statement from Mar-a-Lago, the night that the first bombs fell and killed the old Ayatollah late in February, he said, the primary aim was basically to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapon, unless they get cast iron guarantee, and a cast iron guarantee that also involves all of that 60% enriched uranium being confiscated and taken out of Iran. He will have failed in his war, will he not?
I guess. I mean, look, the Iranians, with the JCPOA, they didn't renege on it strictly. What they did is they exploited it and they wriggled like everything, like anything. Look, I'd be surprised if the Iranians give up all of their stockpiles, because then they really do have nothing left, apart from, as I say, the Strait, which they've got to open at some point. But you can make it. Look, this was always about, setting it back by 5, 10, 15 years and reassessing. But given the degradation into the nuclear facilities, I think that the Iranians will have to compromise to a degree, but I don't think they'll give it all up. I don't. I think they might assess that, you know what, we just keep fighting and fighting and fighting, because otherwise we...
Yeah, and they don't care about what their people think, because they don't live in a democracy. As you say, this is one of the issues for democracies fighting tyrannies like this. Let me ask you about what our supposed democracy, where apparently we do get told stuff and our politicians are representing us. It doesn't feel like that at the moment with this Mandelson affair. But one of the major revelations over the weekend was these big flagging up of the vetting that had come up about Peter Mandelson and his links with Russian military and him being monitored by the Russian security services. We already knew quite a lot about his links with Chinese firms already through his lobbying company. You've written a lot in this sort of field. What do you think's been going on there in terms of Mandelson's links with those organisations?
Look, I don't know, but someone like Mandelson would have been on their radar, okay?
Yeah.
They're looking for officials in enemy countries. Britain is very high up on the... It's like the Iranians. The Russians, Iranians still think we run half the world. It's very gratifying.
God bless them.
In a certain way. God bless them, Julia. So you look for vulnerabilities, right? And everybody, I mean, my aunt knows how avaricious Mandelson is, you know, so he would have been vulnerable. And we know he was vulnerable because he was hanging out with all sorts of people he never should have hung out with. So that's someone that would have been a prime target for FSB and other security services. I have no information of what actually happened, but it does stand to reason, given what he was involved in and given the positions he held in the British government and who he was close to.
Yeah, indeed. It wouldn't have been a surprise to anyone, would it? And it certainly wasn't, because everyone was talking about it. Anyway, David Petrie-Carahos, thank you very much for joining us from the Mail. 11:47 is the time. Quick response from Sam Armstrong to all of that. I mean, the Prime Minister, apparently, he's very much involved in trying to deal with all this in his utterly pointless virtual meeting with a load of other countries not involved in this this conflict at the weekend. But, you know, do you think we're going to see a quick deal done?
Well, my suspicion is it's going to go on for at least another 3 or 4 weeks, which means that actually in terms of fuel prices, they're likely to be very, very high right through until August.
And supplies of everything else.
And airline fuel as well, in particular, could see a lot of summer holidays get cancelled because those short-haul flights aren't the priority for the airlines. Don't make as much money on them.
Although we will save having to queue for 5 hours in an airport, which is what the EU's kind of make us do at the moment. So
well, I think people will be quite angry when it's their summer holiday to Spain gets cancelled.
Yeah. By the way, Greece have said they're not making us do all that biometric nonsense to keep things smooth in the airport. So I've not been paid by anyone for this. Reward Greece. Book your holiday to Greece is what I would say. Exactly the same during lockdown. Reward the countries that are being nice to us. It's a signal. 11:48 is the time. Up next, we are going to be talking about reforms planned to deport up to 400,000 asylum seekers. Are there that many in the country? That's even more worrying. We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk.
Join me, Ian Collins, every weekday. Donald Trump has closed the Strait of Hormuz. This is curious, since the whole point of this part of the war, well, at least as I thought it, or saw it, was to reopen it. Can anybody explain that? You are not a worthy citizen. You couldn't even spot a murderer in your own house. Well, you could. You just didn't tell anyone about it. Everything you need to know. All the breaking news right here on Talk. Only at the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:51 is the time. Let's welcome Philip Kisley to the show. He's a senior fellow at the New Culture Forum and joins us once again. Very good morning to you, Philip.
Hi, Julia. It's great to see you.
Lovely to see you. Now, let's talk about immigration. It's back in the news every single day. And as my guest Sam Armstrong has pointed out, lovely, nice weather out there. We had a lovely weekend. That just means hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands more arrivals on our shores in those dinghies. Now, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage and his Home Affairs spokesman Azir Youssef have been on stage in London at a press conference talking about how they are going to actually start getting rid of these people. Reform said they're going to deport up to 400,000 asylum seekers if they win the next election, creating pop-up detention centres to hold thousands. And this is on top of the 600,000 or so they'd said last year they would. Basically, these are people who have overstayed, who are here illegally. I think a lot of us were going, are there really 400,000 failed asylum seekers in the country?
Yeah, it's insane to think that the numbers are so just utterly out of control. I mean, what's interesting about this, Julia, is for the first time, really, or for the first time in the national debate, let's say, we've got very clear language, and Reform are talking about a retrospective project, aren't they, for 5 years? So that is, again, that's really interesting. They're talking about setting up a deportation command. They're talking about, of course, quitting the ECHR, but also, this is really important, the 1951 Refugee Convention, because this saddles us with all of this stuff, because it was designed for the post-war world. It was designed in the wake of Nazi Germany. Now we live in 21st century Islamism, and that's the problem we have, and we need to close our borders, not open them. So I think there's something here about clarity. There's something here about language which is actually quite satisfying, because if you are going to do something, you need to be able to describe succinctly and clearly what you're going to be doing, and it's the simplicity. There's a beautiful simplicity about it. It is about identifying illegal immigrants, i.e. people who are breaking the law, and stopping them breaking the law, sending them away. Now, there's a caveat here, and I'm thinking about implementation. How exactly is this going to happen?
That's the thing.
The gargantuan thing.
That's a huge number of people. I mean, look, I'll help build the deportation centres. I'll help build the prisons, whatever you need. But we know the reason why these people aren't kept in deportation centres, because there was never any hope of actually getting them deported. They weren't allowed to be kept there for months and months, and then there was big outcries from the human rights hand wringers about people being kept for months and months, even years at an end. This is about you're in, you're out straight away. Their argument is that it won't be on the scale in terms of the deportation centres as people are expecting, because actually a lot of people will choose to leave of their own accord, especially if they are not entitled to benefits anymore. And there have been an awful lot of people who've arrived in this country who've basically been given, they've not been granted asylum. The stats don't show they've been granted asylum. They're just here because the Home Office basically said, we can't deport you. You've said you're from wherever you're from that we can't deport to. So you've basically been given indefinite leave to remain. And these people just stay on the books for years and years on end, even though they don't necessarily have a legitimate right to be here. I think an awful lot of people are going to welcome this, but they'll be very worried if we end up in an ICE situation like America, where you've got, in their case, armed heavies going in to go and find these people. That's the only concern a lot of people would have, I would have thought.
Yeah, but I suppose if you are going to change the way we think, if you're going to change the way we do something, I think we're coming out of the liberal era here, aren't we? And we are. I
like to think so.
99% of people are recognising that this liberal era, this open borders, that we are there to be taken by anybody mindset, just simply hasn't worked for us. All you have to do is look at the stories that we talk about every day, the kind of sexual abuse stories, the violence in our towns and cities from illegal immigrants, migrants, and so on and so forth. So there is something there. We need to change. And sometimes change can be a little bit ugly, if we cannot be too squeamish about it.
And this
we
is
don't want to go too far. Sorry, just to make the point, we don't want to go too far, obviously, but we have to protect ourselves. This is about protecting ourselves, and it isn't about just taking, identifying people and sending them back. It is about dismantling the mechanisms that frustrate democracy, the blob, the human rights.
Absolutely. The system that allowed it to happen. And then this is the thing, isn't it? I mean, you say there will be a lot of people who are squeamish. There'll be lots of legal challenges, no doubt. But and they'll be called an extremist for this. There is nothing extremist about having border controls, enforcing them, and deporting people with no right to be here. That is the moderate centrist view, and was totally and utterly accepted by everybody until 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, the extreme position is having 400,000 illegal immigrants in the country.
No, that's just the asylum seekers. There are way more than that who were just here illegally, who've overstayed their visas. And again, this is about making life rather more difficult. And yes, why wouldn't you want to have, as Theresa May was called, a hostile environment for people who are here legally? Now, what's really interesting is the people are keeping on coming. We know the French are doing very, very little, just making their jetés, taking I mean, it's 5 to midday. They'll be going off for a 3-hour lunch now. They won't be bothering to do anything. But we now find out Belgian officials are basically, because we had to have a thing where the Belgians were pretty good on this and weren't becoming such a problem. No, Belgian officials are basically helping small boat migrants. Once they get into the water, they're escorting them to French waters. Then the French authorities escort them into the middle of the channel, over 1 metre over our side of the water, and then they go, "Oi, Britain, can you come and take these people?" And then we've got them, and then
Britain welcomes them in.
There's basically, a very complicated taxi system, and everyone's involved, sending all these people over here. Enough is enough.
Yeah, I think once you have one front, it's very easy then for people who want to infiltrate to open other fronts, especially when the authorities on the other side are very, very happy for them to come over here. In other words, to leave their countries. Your colleagues on The Sun did a really lovely piece today, actually, describing what conditions are like in Belgium for these people. And they're pretty tough, actually. No wonder they want to come here. Again, it comes back to this same point, doesn't it? Again, it comes back to this same point. We need to make conditions tough here. We need to stop the benefits. If there is a very definite benefit or set of benefits for these people to come over, they will do. And let's not forget, they are from cultures that absolutely hate us. We are talking about mostly undocumented males. We don't know where the hell what the hell they've done. They are potentially criminals. They are dangerous to women and children. And there is a value judgment here, Julia, that is happening. And it is literally our authorities are making a decision between foreign criminals and women and children.
And our safety.
Sacrificing women and children.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Philip Kisley, Senior Fellow at the New Culture Forum, thank you so much for that. Very quick response from Sam Armstrong to that.
They all need to go. I'm sorry, every single one of them
reasonable
needs to
position.
go back. And I don't care where they came from. They can go back precisely to where they came from in the first place.
They can go where, I don't care where they go. Not my problem anymore. No, absolutely. I've said to Nigel Farage, and I've said on air, I will personally be putting people on planes. I'm happy to. Honestly, I can do. I think I leave my job. I could finish at 1. I can spend the afternoons putting people up in planes. I don't mind. Happy to do it. I'm sure there'll be plenty of people like me who'll happily volunteer to do that job. And again, it's not an extremist view. This is not a party political view. This is what used to be considered just being sane and normal until about 5 minutes ago. It's coming up to midday. We're going to talk more about all of these topics, including what on earth is the Prime Minister going to say? And will he convince you that he just didn't know anything about Peter Mandelson's vetting? We'll talk to Ian Duncan-Smith about that up next. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good afternoon to you. It's 2 minutes past midday. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, or your connected device, it is fantastic to have your company. Thank you so much for joining us. An awful lot to talk about, an awful lot of phone calls to get to as well. I definitely want to get to as many calls as we can in this hour. I'm asking you a really simple question. Do you believe the Prime Minister? Do you believe Sir Keir Starmer's claim that he didn't know that Peter Mandelson had failed security vetting for his role as UK ambassador to the US? Because apparently everyone else knew, but no one told the Prime Minister, which is why he lied to us again and again and again and again. Tell us why you think he did know and that he's lying, or tell us why you think he didn't know. And he's been telling us the truth, and he's just basically utterly incompetent, out of touch with what's going on in his government. I mean, that's your best case scenario for this Prime Minister, isn't it? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls to charge the national rate. Text cost £1, standard network rate message. Delighted to say, joining me for the entire show, great to have him back in the studio, commentator Sam Armstrong. Afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon.
There's an awful lot to talk about. I mean, we'll talk a bit about the Greens. We're going to talk a little bit about the Royals, but basically the only story in town right today is absolutely about Peter Mandelson's appointment as the UK ambassador to the United States, and what the Prime Minister and his staff did or did not know when he was appointed, when he was sacked, everything that he said in the House of Commons. I've been playing clips all morning to basically, I really just want, it's such a complicated story, and there's a new revelation basically every 20 minutes, and I really want to just sort of try and make it, you know, kind of Janet and John clear about why this is such a significant story. The latest development in the last half hour, which we'll talk about with our next guest as well, is that Keir Starmer was advised that a political appointee such as Peter Mandelson, not a time-serving ambassador who's then promoted to the Washington job, should undergo national security vetting before he was formally appointed. Who told him this? Lord Case, Simon Case, the then Cabinet Secretary. He set out the process ahead of the appointment. He wrote to the Prime Minister, you should give us the name of the person you would like to appoint. We will develop a plan for them to acquire the necessary security clearances and do due diligence on any potential conflicts of interest or other issues of which you should be aware before confirming your choice. This was a note sent to the Prime Minister on the 11th of November 2024. 20th of December, just a month and a bit later, but Peter Mandelson was appointed. He didn't go through the proper expedited vetting process until later, and he failed that, and we're told that the only person aware of this at that time was Ollie Robbins, who was then, after 2 weeks, had just been appointed as the permanent secretary at the Foreign Office and thought it was best not to tell anyone at all, and has now been sacked, apparently, for this heinous crime. Sam Armstrong, this is a document that's just been released it's made public. It's something that was part of that whole humble address, the vote in Parliament to require the government to basically come clean on what they did or did not know. This is the exact opposite of a get out of jail free card for the Prime Minister. This is a get into jail free card.
Yeah, in a sense, I almost have a little bit of sympathy with Starmer on this one. Let me explain, because I do think it's important that the Prime Minister can appoint whoever he likes, and there's not a civil servant that's in charge of it. The problem with Starmer is, the trade-off of that, though, is that you've got to show good judgment as Prime Minister. I want to elect people with good judgment to make good decisions. The trouble with Starmer is he has pants judgment, so he always says, I use the system, follow the system. The trouble is here, he has ignored the system, and then having been caught out for exercising terrible judgment, he's tried to then blame it. And then the system turns around in the back, and the civil servants say, well, look, we told you. We said, look, there's this perfectly reasonable process by which you can get a very average civil servant type ambassador into the role. You chose to ignore it. You chose to rush it through. That's your right. You're the Prime Minister. But you own it. And Starmer just wouldn't fess up where this all came out at the first moment. If he'd said, look, it was a huge risk, I took a risk because I thought this relationship really matters, I got it wrong, hands up, no excuses, won't happen again, voters, judge me at the next election, he would have been fine. Instead, he attempted to wriggle out of it, blame the civil servants, and they've come back to bite him.
OK, well, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Right now, let's talk to my first guest in this hour, former Conservative Party leader, Sir Ian Duncan-Smith MP. Very good afternoon to you, sir.
Afternoon, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. What do you make of, just first of all, this latest revelation that Sir Lord Case, the former Cabinet Secretary, I mean, God, he's gone through quite a few, hasn't he, this Prime Minister, the Lord Case told the Prime Minister that he needed to vet any political appointees such as Mandelson before he appointed him, and about 5 weeks later just went ahead and appointed him anyway.
Well, I think you need to take a pace back and have a look at exactly what happened, because here we get to see what he was trying to do, that is Starmer. So he makes, it's already rumoured back earlier in 24 that he was going to get this appointment.
Yeah.
Now, with the Interparliamentary Alliance for China, we raised this a number of times. I raised it in 24 to say, how can this individual be allowed to occupy a post with all that we know about his links with China and all the other problems that he had with Russia and being on the board of a company after Russia has invaded the Crimea. All this sort of stuff was there. I mean, chapter and verse. His relationship with Deripaska, the aluminium guy, very close to Putin, on his yacht when the EU, and he's the EU commissioner, is looking at the tax position and the tariffs on aluminium. He's busy sitting, having a holiday on the man's yacht that they're aimed at. So all of this was very clear, and we went after him, and I even put a Freedom of Information request on the government to tell me exactly what they did to be able to demonstrate his worth as regards to being ambassador. Now, then you think about this for a second and say, well, why would the Prime Minister appoint somebody, not just appoint them, but with a real fanfare? He was appointed, big public showing, the whole thing. Why would he do that before, as we now know, he was advised to have the vetting done as should be done first? And the answer is very simple, I think. You get down to the bottom of all of this. He did it in a big way to demonstrate to the officials in the Foreign Office that no matter what, this is his choice. Now, it's very difficult for a Foreign Office official to say, well, no matter that this is the elected government's choice of ambassador, we are therefore going to try and veto it. That's not what they do.
Yeah.
What they may have done is raised all these points, but they were going to approve it because it's what the elected government said they wanted.
Which is fair enough. But the argument the Prime Minister has given is, but if I'd known that there were all these security concerns or that he'd failed his vetting, I wouldn't have done that. And this is
let's get to the security concerns. Let's get to the security concerns. He knew all the security concerns. Even if he only just read what I'd written or raised in the House of Commons, all the stuff that was coming out, reported in the newspaper about Mandelson's connections, all of this was in the public domain.
Not just the Jeffrey Epstein relationship, but the China, the Russia, everything.
This is all about the connections, dangerous connections with President Xi, Putin, all that sort of stuff, which is what I understand they have ruled him out over, or that's what they wanted to do. And of course, the Prime Minister knew all of that. His office knew all of that. This idea that they now centre on one single thing that didn't happen, which is he wasn't told whether he had survived the vetting, that's irrelevant. It's not that matters. It's your knowledge of this man's corruption, his own corrupting process, all the way through, and you still chose to bully the Foreign Office to appoint him. You knew. There is no question. It's not about not being told. It's about not knowing.
But also, the key thing about this letter that's been revealed from Lord Case, the Cabinet Secretary, is making it very clear that basically talking about you need to acquire the necessary security clearances and due diligence on any potential conflicts of interest or other issues of which you should be aware before confirming your choice. So he ignored the advice of the Foreign Office, he ignored the security vetting. His argument is that, but if I'd known he'd failed security vetting, then I wouldn't have appointed him. But this is the thing, and certainly in the last few hours we've been playing clips again and again of all the time he's basically said, yeah, everything was done, he was past security vetting, and he had no concerns. He's said this in press conferences, he's said this in PMQs on a number of occasions. but I suppose he's going to take a lawyerly sort of weaselly sort of way of defending himself, which is that, but I didn't know. But he had a duty to ask, and his staff had a duty to tell him, because this had been what was advised. So I still don't understand why Ollie Robbins, who's now been sacked, we may hear from him tomorrow in the Commons, when questioned by a committee of MPs about the decision, but he's now been sacked because he didn't. He says he obeyed the rules, but he didn't tell the Prime Minister. But we know that, half the Cabinet Office knew. The Cabinet Secretary knew for 2 weeks before the Prime Minister of the specific vetting fail. Why wouldn't he tell the Prime Minister's office, whether it's his Chief of Staff or the Prime Minister himself or the Cabinet Secretary, whoever it was, why wouldn't he say, look, I know you've appointed this guy and I know you want to stick with that, but he has failed the security vetting. I thought you'd want to know.
I think you'll find tomorrow he will make this quite clear. He didn't because he didn't need to. What he will say, and I believe this to be correct, it was made very clear, abundantly clear to him, that this was the Prime Minister's choice. The Prime Minister, the elected Prime Minister of a government that now governs the UK. Civil servants' jobs are to let people know about what the problems or issues are. Yeah. But if the Prime Minister, if the government wants to go ahead, providing it's not utterly unlawful, then their job is to provide the circumstances for them.
And he knew, he would have known that the Prime Minister's officials were already aware.
This is our choice.
No, not just that. They were all... Everybody was already aware.
Well, of course they were,
the
because the Cabinet Office had already done some due diligence on this prior to this. We had been warning them endlessly of all the connections. The idea he wasn't in the know about Mandelson is utter nonsense.
So what happens now? Because we're going to see more and more of these documents. Every single day, more slips out, even down to the fact, in 2023, the security services approached and that she spoke to Keir Starmer. We think his office, him, either way. Again, if he keeps appointing staff who don't tell him anything, that's another issue for him as well, that he was warned even when he was in opposition about Mandelson and a lot of his protégés working and being close to the leader of the opposition and concerns they had then. So we know all of that. What does this mean in terms of what he has to say in the Commons today? Because the argument is not just that he had a terrible error of judgment in appointing Mandelson, despite all the concerns, that he lied to Parliament about what he knew when, but also crucially he has lied, repeatedly making claims about the due process going forward as with any normal ambassador and vetting having been carried out. That was a lie. His argument is that he didn't know that was a lie. Is that a justification, or is the rest of it enough to basically hang him out to dry? Has he done enough to actually be forced to resign?
Well, being forced to resign requires the Labour Party to decide that, because they're the ones that hold the vote in the House of Commons. But
no, the Standards Committee, if there is this referral to the Standards Committee...
Yeah, but to get a referral to the Standards Committee, Labour has to vote for it.
Right,
Boris Johnson was sent to the Standards Committee because lots of Conservatives voted to send him there. So the reality is Labour holds the answer to that question. But the reality for the public is very simple. He knew who he was appointing. Yeah. He knew all about him long before actually even went to the Foreign Office to have checks. He knew this, which is why he was so desperate to appoint him, because he thought he would be very good in Washington. He was so desperate to get a bit of the glitter and glamour from the Blairite sort of processes, which was really peculiar. He's fixated, by the way, about Blair. He wants to be kind of Blair, I think. And so all of this was part of the problem, but he had determined with his staff, that have now all gone, that this was the answer to their prayer, which is how do we get this odd person in the White House on side with us in the UK. So he decides, right, we're going to put Mandelson in there and he can schmooze and smooth talk them and eventually be all right. But they knew that he was utterly corrupt right the way back from when he was in cabinet. He's been corrupt all along, corrupted by money, corrupted by power. You didn't even need to know about the Epstein stuff to know that he would have been dangerous in that job. That's the whole point that I've been making endlessly when I tried to get a freedom of information request answered by the Foreign Office on what they actually told the Prime Minister. And it turns out that we now know that they didn't tell him, but that's not the same as not knowing.
No.
Knowing is critical, and he knew
crucial.
categorically and could have said, no, with all of that around. His office should have said to him, honestly, Prime Minister, don't do it.
There are a lot of people who are concerned that we've got a civil service that just, frankly, just do their own thing and just totally ignore, national security needs in this case. We'll come on to that in more detail. But just basically, just doing their own thing and not telling the Prime Minister something. The Prime Minister has, makes the ultimate decisions about our national security, our economic policy, diplomatic decisions, you name it. The idea that the Prime Minister should be kept in the dark when a dozen people or plus from February in the Cabinet Office knew about this, when his own Cabinet Secretary, the newly appointed Dame Antonia Romeo, ex of the Home Office, the idea that she should know and not think it appropriate to tell the Prime Minister. The fact that the Cabinet Office has, according to some reports, spent the last few weeks trying to debate and decide whether or not they release this information to the public. The fact that we only know about this from last Thursday's Guardian newspaper getting reports out on this from sources they had. The Prime Minister claims he knew on the Tuesday. Does he come to the House of Commons last Wednesday at PMQs to make a statement saying, look, we're looking into this, I've just been told this, I'm going to give that information to the House right now? No. Do you think he just said it on Thursday? No. Does anyone seriously think we would even be debating this now if the Guardian hadn't revealed it? So do we have a civil service that, regardless of Keir Starmer's, I think, blatant lying to the public in the House of Commons, Keir Starmer, a civil service that is out of control, doing their own thing and ignoring the basis of our democratic system?
Well, I don't think they were doing their own thing. That's the whole point. It had been made clear to them that his choice must then go forward as ambassador.
So everything else is irrelevant.
So why then go through the rigmarole? And by the way, they were probably also somewhere quietly told, we don't want to know.
That's my view.
I reckon, and I don't know whether this will come out tomorrow, but I'm pretty certain it was absolutely clear. When he was announced out, all of us went, this is terrible. What's he doing? Why is he being appointed? We didn't ask, what will the security services turn up about him? Because we already knew.
Yeah,
we knew
that's
he
crucial.
Was corrupt. That's the point. It's what you do in government, and I've been in government, and you can see it every now and then. There's a kind of nudge, there's a nod, there's a... We don't really need to know all of this stuff. We just need to know that he's ready to go.
Don't tell me, and then I'm not lying when I don't know.
Exactly right.
But
and
again,
they were made clear, this is our choice. We do not want to have to make another choice.
Yeah.
That's what's been going on here. So that's why you ask yourself the question, why is the Prime Minister dancing on the tautological definition of whether he asked or whether he was told? That is not the issue. Not being told is not the same as not knowing. He knew everything about Mandelson, everything about him, and the Epstein stuff, they didn't perhaps have the full details of yet because those documents hadn't been released. But there were all sorts of clear...
There was already enough for him not to be appointed, and we discussed it on my show at the time.
Individual.
Yeah, but
he's
also,
a corrupt man.
But also, he had a duty to ask. Again, you can't just say, "Well, I had no reason to ask." Yeah, you did. You'd already been told by the Cabinet Secretary that you needed to know the vetting decision. Here's the thing. Let's talk about the national security side of things, because you talked about how you and others who have been concerned about Chinese and Russia influence in our politics, and that they had that they were possibly playing a role there. As I've always said about Mandelson, he's never met a dodgy billionaire he didn't like. And you mentioned him being on the yacht of Deripaska, the aluminium billionaire, close ally of Russia, of the Russian president. But also one of his biggest clients at his lobbying company was a big Chinese company. He's had close links with a Russian military firm. And again, we understand that definitely the Russians, probably the Chinese as well, were certainly looking into Peter Mandelson as a rather good target for them, because we know this is a man who he's lied about taking money from another cabinet minister to buy his home. He's been involved in helping to get passports for foreign billionaires before and lied about that, and I mean, come on, he had form, we know that. So he would have been an easy target either for blackmail or for corruption. This is the thing. This isn't just about what the Prime Minister said or didn't say. This is about a clear and present danger to our country of a huge national security risk, on what the most senior diplomat having access to the highest level of security vetting, the your eyes only levels of documents in terms of the Five Eyes Security and Intelligence Network, American intelligence, our highest level intelligence, security, defence and economic information. And this was given to this man despite failing security vetting. This is a scandal of epic proportions, is it not?
Well, I think it is, because it all comes back to one single fact: his judgment. His judgment is clearly unsound. And with the staff that he had too, egging him on to do these things, you have to say that this man really probably isn't really fit now to be Prime Minister. The trouble that Labour's got is that they want to get through these local elections, which are in 2 weeks' time, pretty much.
Yep.
And then on the other side, make decisions, not right now, because to do so right now would make it even worse. That's what they think. I'm sure of it. I've talked to a few of them. And
what happens next? By the way, it has just been confirmed by the Foreign Affairs Select Committee that Sir Ollie Robbins will appear before MPs tomorrow, 9 o'clock. In the morning, we'll be seeing and hearing his version of events. Again, I guess it depends on the deal for his departure. We understand there might be some legal action, there may be a payoff, but of course, as we know, senior figures in the civil service who go quietly often get, a nice peerage, a nice little sinecure somewhere. So I'm not saying it's bribery, I'm just saying it's how the system works for people who agree to go quietly. So we'll see that. Just finally, how do you think this works? Because realistically, vote of no confidence, that's not going to make a difference. All the opposition parties don't tally up to the Labour voters. They're not voting for that when we've got local elections coming up in less than a month, just a couple of weeks' time now. We've then got the King's speech, the 13th of May. What do you think happens next?
Well, I think they're going to sit on it because they won't be attracted across to vote. And I think the government knows that. The government knows that they're staring over the brink into the abyss and they don't want to jump. And so what their view is that they'll hang on to him, I think, through the local elections. It's after the local elections, I think, if anything happens, it happens after that.
Okay.
But, it's a nightmare, really, because for Labour, it's very difficult for them to get rid of leaders. The Tory party, they get rid of them all the time.
Well, you should know.
And I happen to be one of them. Quite wrong, of course, for them to do that. But the reality is, for Labour, they haven't got rid of a leader of the opposition or a Prime Minister ever since the Second World War.
Yeah. How's that working out for them?
The reason is their system makes it very difficult. Under the present numbers, they'd need to garner 80 people publicly, MPs, who say they're supporting a particular candidate, who then challenges,
and two of the leading candidates not actually able to stand currently. Burnham's not an MP.
Exactly
Angela Rayner is still waiting to be cleared
so it's
if
very
she
messy,
is by the
I'm
Treasury.
afraid.
Well, HMRC, it's going to be interesting to watch, so isn't it? Great to talk to you, Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, former Conservative Party leader. Thank you very much, Steve, for that. Sam Armstrong, it's very, very interesting. Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, again, yet another person pointing out, we told the Prime Minister and his staff they knew everything.
Yeah, and this is what this story really, really boils down to, which is the Prime Minister just didn't care about the fact that this bloke had to resign a number of times for dodgy dealings, had been best mates with the world's most notorious paedophile, and had been taking money off the Russians and the Chinese. He knew all of that. Like, in essence, the national security stuff is almost a distraction, right? There was nothing actually top secret about that information.
No.
We all knew it. Everyone knew it. The Prime Minister made a dud decision, and he's tried to blame everybody but himself for it.
I mean, literally everybody. I think the cleaner at number 10 would be a bit worried about her job, and indeed Larry the cat may be put out to go to that farm in the countryside because what if he knows, and he's probably to blame as well. I mean, that's the level we're at. It's that risible. Anyway, the Prime Minister is going to be speaking due in a couple of hours. I think with Parliament, they've got education questions, got various other things. It may be a bit later than that, but we certainly know we're going to be hearing from Sir Ollie Robbins, the man who's been sacked and blamed for it all. Sorry, I just don't think this is going to get the Prime Minister out of a tough gig at all on that. Going to get your calls up next. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Do you believe the Prime Minister's claim that he simply didn't know that Peter Mandelson had failed his security vetting for that role as a UK ambassador to the US? Tell us your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Your call's up next. This is Talk.
Join me, Ian Collins, every weekday. Donald Trump has closed the Strait of Hormuz. This is curious, since the whole point of this part of the war, well, at least as I thought it, or saw it, was to reopen it. Can anybody explain that? You are not a worthy citizen. You couldn't even spot a murderer in your own house. Well, you could. You just didn't tell anyone about it. Everything you need to know. All the breaking news right here on Talk. Only at the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. 12:28 is the time. Let's get straight to your calls. And, well, basically, do you believe the Prime Minister? Anne is in Doncaster. Hello, Anne. What do you want to say?
Hi, Julia. Right, thank you for having my call.
No, thank you for calling. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. I genuinely believe Starmer didn't know. Not because he's a fool, simply because he's so insignificant. I think he's just literally there to take the fall.
So literally, he's so uninvolved in anything going on in the office that no one bothered to tell him. It was just like, well, we haven't told John in the corner, or we haven't told Keir either. Don't worry, it's the Prime Minister doesn't care.
Totally. I mean, Ed Miliband, I think, is probably told a damn sight more than Keir Starmer.
Oh, very interesting. You think he's not in control? Now, there have been quite a few reports coming out from Downing Street about how he takes very little interest in anything. He doesn't really make a decision. He doesn't do detail. He's never contacting cabinet ministers going, hey, can we have a meeting about this? I want to be on top of this. Because the thing is, he doesn't do big picture. He doesn't do the big, grand, visionary leadership stuff. But it turns out he also doesn't do the detail and the management stuff either. I don't know what he does do.
This is the thing. He's boring and he's bored. I think, I think he's been put there for a purpose.
Oh, who by?
People like Ed Miliband, who was rejected.
I mean, he was rejected. He could well be leader again. You know, one of my theories, and you know I'm not a conspiracy theorist at all, is it? You look at all the people involved. Mandelson, Ollie Robbins, who negotiated, he was basically Theresa May's bag man who did all the negotiations, trying to wreck or any chance of getting a decent Brexit deal before Lord Frost stepped in with Boris Johnson. We've got, Keir Starmer, massive. They're all massive Romaniacs, these people. It's all there's definitely a big EU cosy little bunch of people there. I wonder if there's some other aspect to this that we haven't really caught up on yet.
I agree with you, actually, because even on the world stage, he's been walked over. He's been made to look like an absolute idiot.
Oh, it's actually embarrassing, isn't it?
It is very embarrassing. And to me, I believe I didn't vote for him.
Mm-hmm. I guess that. I'm going out on a limb. I'd guess that, Anne. Do you think he'll survive?
If the likes of Ed Miliband can use him, yes.
Oh, yeah, you think, genuinely, with all due respect, I think you were ascribing far too much intelligence and control and power and nous to Ed Miliband. I've met him. Trust me.
He's a complete and utter moron.
I mean, we have the same qualifications.
Starmer at the same time.
Fascinating and great call. Thank you very much. Matthew's in Warrington. Hi, Matthew. What do you want to say?
The only good liars in this world are the ones who don't get caught or found out. And Keir Starmer is a compulsive liar. I think since he's been in power, there's nothing that's come out of his mouth that has been... He couldn't lie straight in bed. He's lied about everything, and he's been caught now.
Honestly, if I asked him, what did you have for breakfast this morning, I think he would just automatically lie and say he had cornflakes when he had toast.
Exactly. It's like they knew... No, there's no business in this world, but they knew that Mandelson was corrupt, then dodgy. And he knew that they put him in place before the vetting was finished.
Yeah, well, before the vetting had even started, from by the sounds of it. But here's the thing, even if they didn't know, the best case defence the Prime Minister has is he's utterly incompetent and lazy. That's not a very good look.
No, it's awful. But the other thing is, like, you look at the feeds on like Instagram and stuff. I read something on ITN News, and there was 700 comments. And I scrolled through, and there's not one single positive comment towards. There's nothing. Like us Talk family who listen and contribute on a daily basis.
I love that Talk family. I like that.
Well, we are, aren't we?
Yes.
You know, I listen to you all day long. I love the show. There's not a bad show on here.
Brilliant. Thank you.
And we've all been saying this now for 2 years.
Yeah.
And now the people who, you know, the general public, the working Britain, are now going, hold on a minute, it's a wrong one.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. And he talked such a big game about integrity and honesty and all of that nonsense. And it was nonsense.
But anyone who stands up against him or says anything about him, he removes him. If he'd done it to that lovely MP from Hull, you know, he's a genuine guy. I bet he's a great MP to have. I'd vote for him because he's the person I'd want to represent myself. And because he spoke up against him, he removed him. And because that's communism for you, that's socialism for you. If you've got a voice, you're not going to allow him to speak up. Yeah. And he's going to get found out now. I said to you a couple of weeks ago that my birthday on May the 11th, and I'll be having a piece of cake because he won't be in place. I reckon it'll be done before my birthday now. So
there you are. We should wait and see. Thank you for that. I was going to get some text messages. Going to get another quick call in. Ollie says it was jobs for mates all along. I don't know if was that Ollie Robbins. Is that you, Ollie? Is that you? Megan said, not her. She's busy. She's busy not cooking. Megan says, of course not. Everything goes to the Prime Minister. Alison says, Mandelson has already been sacked multiple times. That should have been enough to preclude him from the position as ambassador, let alone his vetting failing. So no, I don't believe the PM. He's shown an extremely worrying lack of judgment. John says the man doesn't know how to tell the truth. Pete says, no, he doesn't believe the Prime Minister. He's a serial liar and is finished politically. Nobody can stand to hear one more lie come out of his mouth. Meg says, Starmer has a distant relationship with the truth. I couldn't agree with you all more on that front. Grace is on the line in London. Hello, Grace. What do you want to say?
Hi. Well, I know that Lord Glasman said a while ago regarding the Peter Mandelson situation, before the latest revelations, that New Labour it's sin and it needs repenting of. And I think that we all need to repent of things sometimes. And repenting doesn't just mean saying sorry in a really insincere way that the Prime Minister is doing. It means actually being sorry, really genuinely being sorry. And I think that if you genuinely were sorry, I think, you know, we can all be forgiven if we're genuinely sorry. Yeah. But it doesn't mean that things are just eradicated. There's a consequence. And in this case, for him, being genuinely sorry would mean stepping down.
But it would, wouldn't it? It would. You'd have to admit that you'd simply have to admit that you're just simply not up to the job. And he blatantly isn't. It is quite bizarre. It is utterly bewildering to me. He rose to be director of the public prosecutions, let alone became Prime Minister. And what is fascinating is how many people you know who, like in the Labour Party, who are just going, oh God, what did we do? Grace, thank you for that. Just final word there with Sam Armstrong. And this is the thing, Labour benches, bearing in mind the reason we've got like some of the information we've got in the public domain already, and hopefully more, is because the Labour MPs were so angry about the Prime Minister appointing Mandelson, despite knowing about his links with Jeffrey Epstein when he was after staying friends with him after he was convicted. And again, small point, Liz Kendall raised it, you know, what about the concern about Jeffrey Epstein's victims? The story has moved on hugely since then. That's almost like the least of the allegations against him. But Keir Starmer, I mean, he's lost we know behind the scenes, ministers, even cabinet ministers, are messaging political journalists they trust to go, good God, this is an absolute, you know, beep show. No one seems to think he's going to survive. The only thing that is saving him right now is local elections coming up, and this is going to, I would say, damage the vote, but no one wants to see more damage of him actually leaving now if you're a Labour MP or a Labour councillor. We've then got the King's Speech. We've also got the candidates who were running and riding to take over. Well, Andy Burnham's not even an MP yet. He was hoping to get a seat somehow. He can get one within a matter of weeks, as and when. Angela Rayner still wanting to be cleared over her not paying the full amount of stamp duty on her second home. That could take years, realistically. Got a lot of people who were just saying the time isn't right. Also, the people who don't think Keir Starmer's up to the job but think that Ed Miliband is even less up to the job, not wanting to happen. So is there a possibility of him surviving this and just limping on simply because there's no one else to take over?
There's a possibility of him limping on because Labour MPs are such a bunch of sorry cowards. If they're as angry as they're pretending to be when they're calling up lobby journalists and giving off-the-record briefings, well, why don't they chuffing do something about it? And by the way, if you're so angry about this, why were you also not angry when he lied about stopping the boats? Why were you also not so angry when he lied about not putting taxes up? Why were you also not angry when he stabbed pensioners in the back by taking their winter fuel payments in order that he could give it to migrants that were storming into this country? Why are you only angry when it's embarrassing to you in Westminster? Why don't you care about your constituents? Why aren't you focusing day and night on trying to make the lives of the people who live in this country just a little bit better? I don't want to hear it from Labour MPs. They can do something about it. They have the power. They won't. They're a bunch of cowards.
You either are concerned or you aren't, and there's simple action to do if you are. Simple as that. Right, we're going to take a quick break, then we're going to be talking to the Daily Mail's Robert Hardman. He's a very, very esteemed royal author about, well, the latest big royal stories, including a lot of people rather angry at the Duke and Duchess of Sussex still cashing in on their title. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:40 is the time. Let's talk royals right now with Robert Hardman. He's a Daily Mail columnist, also author of the brand new book, Elizabeth II, In Private, In Public, The Inside Story. Very, very good afternoon to you, Robert.
Hello, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. You're also you're being very prolific at the moment. Also, King Charles III, the inside story there. Now, there's no doubt at all. I've been reading a lot of your serializations. You know that. There's a lot of inside story. A lot of people are talking, but there's some very interesting stuff and very much public stuff in terms of the some of the younger would-be ex-royals, and that's the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. They've been on this rather bizarre trip to Australia that sort of seemed to be a sort of a not royal tour, but sort of was, although largely ignored by the Australians rather sensibly. But a poll of Brits over the weekend has exposed that 61%, say 6 out of 10 Brits in this country, think that Meghan and Harry shouldn't be allowed to carry on using their Sussex titles, their royal titles, if not their HRH, for commercial or personal advantage. They're thinking that they are cashing in. Do you think they are?
I think they are in a sense, yes. I mean, you know, they've gone to Australia on what is ostensibly a it's hard to know exactly what the purpose is. Is it a commercial visit? Is it a charitable visit? I mean, Harry has tagged on some charitable engagements, but I think what this visit highlights is the fact that that famous their original plan to be sort of half royal, half the time, and not the rest of the time, was doomed. I mean, this is what happens. You know, this is absolutely living proof of the Queen's old adage, the late Queen's adage, that you're either in or you're not.
Yeah.
And to sort of stick a toe in the water of being royal for a bit, but then sort of charging for photos or charging to come and listen to Meghan talk about her, you know, in a whatever. It's not. It's just not, you know, it sticks in the craw, I'm afraid, of the British public. They don't like it.
And there is a difficulty, and I do kind of feel sorry for younger royals. And we'll say, well, why haven't you got a proper job? And actually, there's quite a lot of jobs they just can't do because they're in that role. But again, their whole big line was, oh, you know, whinging over the end of last week about her having been this, you know, most trolled person in the world. I mean, really, the woman hasn't got a clue. Turn off Twitter would be a simple solution to it. But just claiming that, you know, they had to leave Britain because they wanted some privacy. And then, of course, selling their entire lives, interviews on Oprah Winfrey, the biggest, you know, chat show host in America, his book exposing private conversations in Spare with his brother and text messages and you know, a physical fight at one point, doing you know, the Netflix documentaries. And now they're putting out pictures of their kids. We don't usually get to see their faces, but nevertheless, they are actually constantly out there going, look at us, while maintaining this idea that we're just living our private lives, we just don't want to be bothered, and everyone's got wise to it.
Yeah, no, I mean, there is, as you point out, Julie, I mean, there is just a sense among the British people that they don't like to be taken for fools, and you know, you can come out with this sort of some of this word salad stuff in California, and that's okay. You know, you can talk about you can read back to me some of the quotes we've had in the last few days. I mean, it seems to be in a sort of on-air therapy session, half of it.
Yes.
But as I said,
Oh, hello! You just disappeared, Robert. We just lost your sound. Robert, can you hear me?
British public.
Oh goodness me, we've lost him altogether. Robert, we've got you back.
I'm very sorry. I'm in New York, so
oh well, you know, it's only
rickety connection.
It's only a first world connection. Let me ask you, just in case we lose it again, get to it quickly. I mean, you know, the late Queen, we know again and again, she has been, you know, she apparently has expressed concerns about them leaving, you know, Megxit leaving the royal fold, but also trying to sort of cash in. She'd expressed concerns. Certainly, the now king expressed concerns. But were they expressed ever to the younger royals? Did they ever actually have conversations where they were told you can't do this?
Well, the Sussexes sort of rather upped and left, if you remember, at the tail end of 2019, and there wasn't a lot of discussion. I mean, you know, Harry had been sort of voicing, you know, we know because he wrote about it himself in his book. You know, he kept sort of complaining about the way things were done, wanting the family to operate differently with the media. But you know, the palace, the Queen, the monarchy have had their way of doing it. They're not suddenly going to change the way everything's done just to suit a couple who wanted
funny
to
that.
change the rules.
Just finally, I must ask you about Prince Andrew, because he, of course, was being questioned at great length by many people, wanting to question him even more, about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. It's amazing how often that name keeps coming up, isn't he? And now it's emerged that Prince Andrew basically turned down the FBI's request for an interview about Jeffrey Epstein, not because he was going to be asked as a witness, but because his lawyers feared he was going to be asked as a subject of their interviews, and could therefore, if he incriminated himself, big if there, that he could actually face criminal action, and that the British government, the Home Office themselves, voiced concern that the former prince could end up launching a legal action at the High Court if they helped the FBI to summon him to testify. This is an extraordinary development.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of deep in the legal weeds, if you like. I mean, it does look extraordinary that you wouldn't basically that Britain would not assist Andrew taking the stand in America for fear of being sued by Andrew. But I mean, there has to be a legal process. It has to be followed.
Yeah.
And I think what Andrew's lawyers were objecting to was the way that he was being used, in a sense, to sort of to bring the sort of publicity spotlight on all this. I mean, whatever you say about Andrew, he's got to be treated like any other suspect and not sort of dragged to dry because he's famous.
But then, of course, he did pay 12 million quid to a woman he'd never met over these allegations.
Yes.
There we are. Indeed. We'll leave it there. Robert Hobban, enjoying New York, author of Elizabeth II, In Private, In Public, The Inside Story. Sam Armstrong, I just want to bring you in, but not about the royals. I want to talk, just been handed a statement. Downing Street have done a press briefing with journalists ahead of the Prime Minister giving a statement after 2:30 today in the House of Commons. And according to the spokesman, Keir Starmer is going to admit that he did mislead Parliament, but crucially, he did not knowingly lie to Parliament. That's the get-out clause, which is in terms of the ministerial code, knowingly lie. So, if you say something you believe to be true, it's fine. But he said he would deny having knowingly lied to the House. The Prime Minister would never knowingly mislead Parliament or the public, the spokesman said. He's clear, though, that this information about the vetting should have been provided to Parliament, should have been provided to him, and it should have been provided to other government ministers. And this, of course, after he insisted 3 times back on September the 10th that full due process was followed. Inadvertently misleading Parliament is not usually considered a resigning matter. But you are expected to return to the Commons to set the record straight at the earliest available opportunity. Bearing in mind, he claims he found out first last Tuesday, was in PMQs on the Wednesday, didn't mention it, had an opportunity on the Thursday, only when the Guardian broke the story Thursday afternoon, and then we're getting this statement. Parliament wasn't sitting on Friday, getting this statement today on Monday. I mean, sorry, mate, it's not. That's not going to be good enough, is it?
Yeah, look, I hold no candle for Boris Johnson, but Boris Johnson was forced out of Parliament for quote-unquote misleading Parliament for stuff significantly more anodyne than this. Now, I thought
there wasn't a national security risk, but there was a massive economic risk to having lockdowns that we didn't need to have.
I thought the way he behaved with Partygate and indeed with lockdowns more generally was disgraceful, and I think the Tory party ought to pay a price for that. But if Keir Starmer is the impartial, neutral, genuinely honourable man that he claimed he is, in my view, he probably ought to refer himself to the Privileges Committee and go through precisely the same process that he subjected Boris Johnson through when he was in opposition.
Absolutely. Hear to that. MPs listening, don't forget to ask that. 12:49 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking about why on earth Zach Polanski has been branded, well, frankly, a bit far-right and authoritarian, and why universities will be protecting the free speech of academics, but interestingly, not of students. That's up next. This is Talk.
Join me, Ian Collins, every weekday. Donald Trump has closed the Strait of Hormuz. This is curious, since the whole point of this part of the war, well, at least as I thought it, or saw it, was to reopen it. Can anybody explain that? You are not a worthy citizen. You couldn't even spot a murderer in your own house. Well, you could. You just didn't tell anyone about it. Everything you need to know. All the breaking news right here on Talk. Only at the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. This is Talk, the home of common sense. 12:52 is the time. Let's go straight to my next guest. He's Associate Editor at the Daily Sceptic, Laurie Wastel, and joins us now. Good afternoon to you, Laurie.
Julia.
Sorry for coming to you a bit late. Quite a lot of breaking news today, as I'm sure you will understand. Let's talk to you, though, about not one party leader who is facing a little bit of criticism, Keir Starmer, but also another leader, Zach Polanski, leader of the Greens, because he's done a podcast interview where he sounded a little bit, frankly, well, some are saying authoritarian. I would say downright far right. What did he have to say?
Well, quite, Julia. I mean, it's a really extraordinary insight we got here into his mind, and perhaps a more guarded moment. But basically, it's the idea that anyone who is right-wing has some kind of pathology to them, to such an extent that perhaps Zach Polanski might like to exclude them from society entirely. And this is, of course, the uber-inclusive, liberal and green leader, of course. And we have this extraordinary quote from him. Do we think we can change their minds? Or is it a case of building a society that doesn't include them? Yeah. So I don't really know what that means.
Well,
but it suggests that he's quite authoritarian.
Which is quite a question. Like, I mean, so where are we going to be? Are we going to be deported? I thought they didn't want that. We could just come back in. I mean, to be fair, under his policy, we could just come back in anyway, can't we? Because there's going to be no deportations, and we're all going to get given a free house if we arrive as immigrants. So that's fine. I mean, that's literally Green Party policy. But I mean, are we going to be put in internment camps? Are we going to be killed? I mean, you've got to ask. I mean, you could just argue it's just a turn of phrase, but it's this idea that if you don't agree with me, you're out.
Yes, I mean, it'll be very difficult for him to construct those internment camps, given that it's Green Party policy to see a world without borders. But it certainly does speak to an extraordinary mindset, and that it's this idea that you actually have to not just engage with or convince other people who have different views in your society, but rather repress them in some way. So I think people should be quite worried about that prospect.
Well, I mean, look, it's one of the things that the Daily Sceptic has talked an awful lot about over the last few years, which is about, freedom of debate and discussion, and why everything should be up for debate and discussion and nothing off limits. And it's very, very interesting that somehow universities might get a little inkling of that again. Look, I went to university at a time when not only were you paid to go to university, I got a maintenance grant, but no fees. I know, don't get upset with me. But I also was in a time when it was perfectly normal that people would disagree, and you'd have a bigger disagreement, and then you'd all go for a pint together and no one thought anything of it. Life is very different now. Now you could even be sacked from your job, basically hounded out of a university for expressing views which used to be common sense 10 minutes ago. But what is this new announcement from the government in terms of what universities could face if they don't allow freedom of speech?
Oh, well, it's fines of up to £500,000 or 2% of their revenue, which is, well, it's a great victory. I think we have to put this all in context, though, because there's quite a saga of us getting here. So this is part of the provisions of the previous government's Higher Education Freedom of Speech Act. And this introduced various different provisions and abilities for people to sue their universities if they were cancelled in some way, had their free speech rights impinged on, which is it's a cross-party law, and it was absolutely right that it was brought in. But outrageously, right at the start of Bridget Phillipson, Education Secretary, her tenure, so back in August 2024, her almost first decision was to pause, so-called, the implementation of certain of its provisions, which she outrageously, actually, not her, but someone in her department, described as the Tories' hate speech charter.
I mean, hate speech including, for instance, saying things like, I don't think a man who puts on a dress is a woman. I mean, we're talking at that level of apparent hate speech.
Well, quite. These are the kinds of things that students have had their rights trampled over for saying. And so there's been a tremendous legal battle led by the Free Speech Union, who threatened actually to bring Bridget Phillipson to judicial review over that decision, because really it was these were those provisions would have been commencing legislation that had already been gone through Parliament. So she didn't really have the power to do it. She eventually backed down, and so now these provisions will be protecting staff and external speakers who may be cancelled. But it is interesting, isn't it, that now, Julia, we are seeing Bridget Phillipson saying, "Oh well, freedom of speech is the foundation of every university's success."
All of a sudden, but this doesn't apply to students. Though students can't bring these cases.
No, exactly. And that is what the Free Speech Union continue to campaign on, actually, because that is a key element. Yes, it's certainly true that people have been disinvited or cancelled after being invited to speak on campuses, and that this has been, staff like the gender-critical philosophy professor Kathleen Stock, for instance, have had to essentially leave university after being harassed and not protected. But nevertheless, that means it remains a significant free speech issue for students. Yeah. And we could go into, there's still examples.
Sadly not at 12:57, but it is interesting. We'll keep a close watch on this one. So appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much, Laurie Wastel of the Daily Sceptic. Thank you for that. And Sam Armstrong, you do work with the Free Speech Union, been joining us all day, and there is that concern that it's just not, it doesn't really apply to students well. But it is utterly preposterous to me that anyone thinks that people shouldn't be allowed to express their opinions, their views, and debate ideas on a campus. And if you can't do it at a university, where the hell can you do it?
But they don't want us talking about ideas. They don't want us discussing facts, and they won't just stop at universities. The left took over universities across the West in the 60s and 70s, and they've spread out with their mad, bonkers ideas ever since.
Trans ideology,
and now they want to do the same to the internet, to the public space, to everywhere. That's what the left always do. They always want to shut down alternative opinions.
It's really weird. I never know why people are threatened by alternative opinions, because if you think your opinions are right and they're based on fact and truth, then there you are. Then you wouldn't be troubled by it, because you know you can argue the point. This is what we try and do on this show, and I know it's going to happen on the next show as well. Mark Dolan is